The Actilus Empire is known to be rich in heirs, the strongest of whom occupies the imperial throne. Since time immemorial, it has been the custom for all heirs to seek the crown, to become the supreme ruler to whom they will be subject. This means only one thing: the one who survives becomes emperor. To do this, you must participate in the slaughter with the others and prove yourself strong enough to win by killing the other competitors. Of the previous ruler's children, the youngest took the throne. He succeeded in overthrowing all the others, despite his hard work and age. Everyone learned the new emperor's name at the succession ceremony, which the boy attended at age 13. After the young man finished his work, he braided the hair of his slain brothers and sisters and brought it to his father. He pointed his sword at them, as if asking them to admire how everyone else had lost after a competition that hadn't even been that difficult. The treacherous man praised his son's exploits in every way. He tried to charm him, to tell him later that the time had not yet come, but it never happened. At that very moment, a sharp blade plunged into his chest, piercing his heart. The young prince pretended nothing was happening. He stood, smiling innocently, right in front of his father, who was choking, trying to cling to the last drops of air that could do nothing. Smiling easily, the blond man didn't even apologize for what he'd done, arguing that he was tired of waiting. One day he thought about it and realized he wanted to ascend to the throne as quickly as possible, because he was irritated by the fact that anyone, even slightly, was more important in the empire. This boy was none other than the current emperor of Actilus, Raniero Actilus. He is renowned throughout the empire, and the people, knowing his strength and the precise method by which he ascended to the throne, continue to fear him more than fire. The priest asks the man if he wishes to live under the protection of the god Ailra so that his family relationships will be strong for eternity. The girl standing nearby shudders, for she can describe the sadness of what is happening. It was then that the protagonist realized she was finished. She didn't even know how to open her mouth to express her feelings, or even agree with what was being asked of her. The oath had to be made now. The brunette glares at the girl. He says nothing, but it's clear he's demanding an immediate answer, one that's completely inaudible. Gritting her teeth and wiping away tears, the heroine finally says the long-awaited yes. In that case, the couple can continue. They must finish the ceremony as quickly as possible before the blonde gets bored with everything that's happening. The voice makes him tense up even more. In this case, the couple can exchange rings to finally put an end to it all. Even the priest doesn't want to stand nearby, lest he fall victim to the emperor's wrath, who can lose his temper at any moment over a trifle. The blonde reaches for the ring. She tries to be more careful, but her hands continue to shake. If the thing accidentally falls to the floor, her head will follow it in the next 5 minutes or even sooner, which is, of course, terrifying. The man standing behind watches as each person puts on their ring and then asks to seal the vow with a kiss. The beautiful woman closes her eyes in anticipation of what is about to happen. Nothing happens for even the next minute. The girl gradually opens her eyes, unsure what exactly is wrong. Perhaps the guy is simply trying to skip this moment because he finds his fiancée repulsive. Raniero's face is just a few centimeters away. He stares intently, his scarlet eyes flashing, as if he himself is expecting something. You want to run out of the room, leaving everything behind, but you have to remain in one place, motionless and unable to speak. The hero grins sharply and says something, making the girl even more nervous. She doesn't notice anything happening around her because she's only concerned with what happens next. She doesn't want to die because of some mistake. Grabbing the beauty by the waist and pulling her closer, the young man continues to smile. He leans closer to be close to her ear and talks about the boredom that has almost overtaken him. If the girl had opened her eyes 5 seconds later, it would have all been over. A kiss ensues, breathtaking even in slow motion. It's hard to believe, but it was at this very moment that the main character found herself transported into a novella and reincarnated at a wedding ceremony with a deranged, villainous emperor from whom she couldn't escape. This man truly is the most vicious and, at times, downright cruel. As is known, the blonde had an acquaintance who fell in love with the holy knight Eden. The young man's anger quickly overwhelmed him, so he killed him. Seraphima was so upset that she went berserk, losing control and spiraling into a full-blown rage. She couldn't bear such a loss, as she loved her boyfriend more than anything in this world. The emperor was trapped in fate. These are the prologue to the novella, Flowers Grow Even in the Abyss. This book features many different characters, each with their own wonderful story that doesn't end tragically. For some reason, the beauty who made history became an empress who wasn't all that famous. There was almost no information about her, so she shouldn't expect great fortune or a bright future. In a society where each person can only have one spouse and divorce is impossible, in the Actilus Empire, a second marriage is permitted only after the death of the partner. After a man kidnapped a saint, he first killed his wife to prevent her from interfering with his future. The empress, whose name wasn't even known, loses her head at the very beginning of the novel. The girl was lucky to have become the empress, so this naturally saddens her. It's terrifying to even think about a future that will never come. Perhaps this is the author's punishment for leaving a less than favorable review. It's not the girl's fault, as a similar novella was sold in the romance section and left the heroine deeply disappointed. Before entering history, the beauty had read numerous books in which heroes inhabit other bodies. But usually they inhabit the body of a villain. They alter the original story, avoiding the villain's own crimes, thereby saving their own lives. Everything was supposed to go according to plan, but for some reason the maiden has inhabited the body of the most insignificant minor character, who didn't even commit a single act. The lady doesn't know how to escape her fate. Now the blonde thinks it would be better if she were the villain. Then she could at least try to act contrary to the original story, but now she can only guess what can be done. If the heroine had appeared in this world before marriage, her first order of business would have been to do everything possible to avoid it. One option would have been to fake her own death by throwing a doll off a cliff and then flee as far as possible from the empire. Another option is to tame the emperor, which seems entirely possible, but certainly not in this world. The girl begins to go mad because she forgets the true nature of the tyrant who cares nothing for anyone but himself. One can imagine how Raniero would react to someone's thoughtless attempt to tame him. Perhaps it would be worth a try if he had at least 9 lives. But in this situation, that's not an option. The girl doesn't want to die so easily anyway. She's terrified of what awaits her if she doesn't do anything. All she can do is live as if she's already dead. But not quite. It's a suitable last resort, and that's what's happening now. In the novella, it was said that His Majesty never visited the Empress after his marriage. She tried to subtly protest the way their family life was going, but this turned out to be her biggest mistake. The maiden reminded him of herself too often, but at the same time did not allow himself to be forgotten. So as soon as the prince brought the saint to the city, he immediately got rid of the annoying toy, which could not calm down. The maiden has no intention of committing such rash acts. She values her life, and especially her freedom. On the day her husband goes to the temple to fetch Seraphima, the blonde will pretend to be dead and flee as soon as she can find a way out. Actilus likely won't seek confirmation of the Empress's death, since the heroine was killed so that the saint could take her place in the future. If his wife doesn't interfere, he'll be only too happy, so he won't bother. After realizing what needed to be done, the girl was literally fired up by the idea. It turned out to be much simpler than she thought, so all that remained was to make it a reality as quickly as possible. Closing her eyes in calm, the girl flushed slightly. She knew she was worrying needlessly, so now she was only happy with how everything would end for her. A male voice addresses the Empress. His Majesty wants to know how long the beauty intends to stand there and pretend she doesn't notice anyone around her, much less hear anything. The eyes light up with an evil fire. The blonde may believe they're trying to ignore him, so he reacts in this way, while trying to remember everything he did to people in the past. The girl tries to remain calm, but she knows perfectly well that this is not a good sign. She doesn't want to die prematurely, so the first thing she needs to do is watch her behavior to avoid getting into trouble. Everything had already been decided, and the lady even decided to be so inconspicuous that her face would not even be noticed even after the wedding. But in a second, she managed to ruin everything, as if the original plan had been forgotten. The girl almost immediately declares that she would never dare behave so disrespectfully. She wants to step forward to say something else. but trips and falls. Her body stretches across the floor, causing the woman to quietly hiss in pain. The queen tries to rise slowly, but in a way that won't bore her husband while she's doing it. The only positive is that the heroine was able to respond quite quickly, which was a welcome relief. Raniero, as everyone knows, hates boredom. In his presence, everything must go smoothly. Even Seraphima in the novel was tortured because she sometimes hesitated to respond. Countless servants suffered for the same reason or because they displeased the emperor. You have 5 seconds to respond. But, nevertheless, however, these are words forbidden to utter around a man. Now the blonde man forces the girl to raise her head and explain her actions before she gets worse. There's absolutely no time to think, so the beauty says the first thing that comes to mind. She has a chronic illness that causes her to lose consciousness with her eyes open. It even sounds almost plausible. The girl misjudged the tone of her voice, so she almost shouted every word. Lowering her voice to a whisper, she repeated the same words but was gently rebuked. The letter sent from the kingdom of Unro didn't say a word. She has to work her brain hard, but nothing really works. The beauty tries to justify herself, saying that such things happen so rarely that no one pays attention to them. Her face betrays her true thoughts and the lies themselves. Perhaps this was provoked by His Majesty's presence. A timid person like her has trouble adapting. His Majesty's temperament is difficult for even the strongest to bear. Coming closer, the young man nods. He leans closer to the girl's face to ask if it's his fault. The obvious seems terrifying, so the blonde immediately freezes, trying to find a new answer. In any case, finding a way out of any situation is still possible. Beauty uses the sun as an example. Anyone who looks directly at the sun will immediately go blind, but no one will blame them because the blame lies with the person who did it. Covering her face with her hands and lying on the floor to bow, the woman hears the man begin his sentence once again. She wants him to finally leave because she's long since outgrown the fantasy of such phrases. The young man grins. Angie intends to avoid looking at him until her dying day, just to stay conscious. If His Majesty allows it, the girl will be happy to carry out any order given. The hero is silent, but then says he allows everything. The lady is about to get up, but realizes in time that she doesn't know exactly what she's being allowed to do. She looks at the shoes perched on the hem of her dress. Choosing wrong would be as scary as failing to make a choice in 5 seconds. If you try to watch, perhaps everything will be fine, because choosing the lesser of two evils, the Virgo gradually raises her head and gaze. Dropping to one knee, the blonde praised his wife. Clearly, she made the right choice, which has kept her alive for now. All she can do is try to calm down and not show her fear so openly. The hero made the right decision. He's no longer bored, which is good news. It's evident right on his face, as his gaze no longer seems as terrifying and withering as it had been a little while ago. The girl starts hiccuping, trying to quickly cover her mouth with her hand or simply shut it. She can't let anything else make this end. This sound isn't because she's sick, but because she's still alive, and that's a joy. The girl turned out to be quite smart. She's not overly proud. If she does something wrong, she immediately bows and takes action. If the Empress really is like that, it's good for her reputation and the empire as a whole. Raniero was amused by his behavior, so he relented a little. He offered to ask him any question, and he'd be sure to answer it. This option was also difficult because if he didn't like it, he'd throw another tantrum. Trying to figure out what exactly to say, the lady quickly says that she heard Actilus chose her himself. Wanting to know why he chose this particular man, the girl falls silent after all that has been said. Clenching his throat much more tightly than before, the hero clicks his tongue in disappointment and then turns away. This question was too predictable and therefore disappointing. Answering something like that could drive you crazy with boredom. His gaze became icy again, causing the maiden to involuntarily shudder and shrink slightly. She stumbled again when given the choice of what to say to the king. Releasing his grip on her neck, the blonde man stands up. He turns to walk away, still looking displeased. He won't do anything because he promised to spare his wife, but that doesn't mean it will be the same next time. The hero moves forward toward the window. On the way there, he begins talking about the moment he announced his marriage. Immediately afterward, all the aristocrats sent photographs of their daughters, of which there were many. According to the young man, there were so many photographs that they could have filled the entire walls of the room they were in. No one had anticipated the massive undertaking. Opening the curtains, the blond man turns back. His lips stretch into a strange smile, making his intentions clear. He ordered the portraits hung lengthwise, precisely because he wanted them that way. The young man didn't do this because he wanted to memorize faces, because such things don't interest him at all. His Majesty's face is the most beautiful in the world, so it's logical he wouldn't want to look at anyone else. Anyone less beautiful. The gaze shifts to the wall next to the girl, still sitting on the floor. It's adorned with a huge cutout, seemingly pierced by a knife or blade. Back then, when the young man was choosing his wife, he sat in the same place as now, right in front of the wall on which hung many photographs sent by aristocrats. The hero had no intention of hitting the one he liked, so he threw at random. Ultimately, he managed to hit the left eye of the blonde who was hanging highest above all the others. That very girl was his choice. Now, sitting in a deserted room with only 2 people in it, Actilus bursts into laughter that sounds more like a madman's. He made sure everything went as planned. Raniero almost immediately takes back his words about boredom and madness. Back then, he still found it fun to do such things because at the time, it lifted his spirits a bit and made him laugh. The hero suddenly declared that the beauty was not at all funny or cheerful. Leaving the room slowly, the man said he was going to go to bed. He didn't say the Empress was ugly, so that could be considered a plus. Almost leaving the room, the handsome man began to think. He wanted to know the Queen's name because his life partner had never even imagined her first or last name, which was known throughout the kingdom. Virgo remained silent, unsure of what to say. The thought of revealing her true name keeps swirling in her head. No one knows the real initials of the queen, who was no one of any consequence, which means something like this might work. Raising her head higher so that her focused gaze could be clearly seen, the girl said her name was Angelica Vineyard de Unro. She finally managed to remember the heroine's true name, so she didn't even have to lie. Close friends call the girl Angie. It's a perfect name because it's short and easy to use. The blonde asks for it so he doesn't get confused by remembering too much unnecessary information. Raising his foot, the hero rests his shoe on the beauty's chin, telling Angie to keep up the good work. It seems the adaptation is going quite well for now, or something will go wrong in the future. Releasing the girl, the young man turns away. He realizes he'll soon tire of this situation, and then he'll be able to get rid of his wife without any problems, as she'll likely only get in the way of his life and his problems. Smiling, Angelica promises to try to improve. She knows she needs to be more careful, at least to wait until Seraphima arrives at the palace with the emperor, who fell in love with her at first sight. Turning around, the hero chuckled. If the woman herself says she'll do everything possible to be better than before, you need to listen to the words that come out of her mouth. As soon as the door slams, the blonde collapses onto the cold floor. She can't believe she managed to resist the onslaught that was coming at her. It's a relief. It was fortunate that the beauty remembered the heroine's name early enough and wasn't killed for taking too long to answer. She's not sure Unro was the queen when Seraphima arrived, as her name wasn't mentioned in the novel, but it worked anyway. It turns out that Angelica was killed shortly after her wedding due to some stupid mistake she made. Raniero's wife in the novel was a different woman, the 5th of his wives. The wedding day ended beautifully, so the girl hoped there would be no further threats to her life or future. However, in the end, it turned out that each day would be more difficult than the last. The emperor, in bed with the girl, asks her to turn back and not toss and turn. He counts to 3 until she stops trying to change position. Angie didn't expect to hear a man's voice, so she jumps up almost immediately, trying to figure out how exactly the character ended up in her bedroom, let alone in the same bed with her. The blonde didn't want to go back to his quarters, so he decided to stay. This answered the question he'd accidentally asked out loud instead of keeping it in his head. Even if the words hadn't been spoken aloud, it wouldn't have made any difference. Every thought, even the ones she tries to push out of her head, is written all over the wife's face, making them quite obvious. The hero grins, letting go of the girl's face. He can't believe a woman wakes up after 9 a.m. That means she's lazy, which can't be a true quality for someone as high ranking as she is. The imperial couple woke up too late, but the heroine can't understand why no one woke her. She's not used to getting up on her own, and now she's being blamed for it by her own husband. The girl is boring and uninteresting. Raniero has said this before, but this time his gaze seems colder than usual. It's clear he's clearly dissatisfied with something. Yesterday, the same man said he'd chosen Unro, but this morning his mood had changed, making everything much better. His thoughts were interrupted by a female voice calling out to Her Majesty. The headmaid promises to help the woman get ready for the new day, which she must greet well. The first thing she needs to do is take a bath, and in this matter, the beauty completely trusts others, because she doesn't want to think about anything else. 10 minutes later, the main character is already sitting in warm water that smells slightly of vanilla and roses, which literally float in the water in the form of petals added by the staff. The husband's words were more than enough to understand where this would lead. He would never come to his wife again, despite her trying to make things as good as possible. For now, all that remains is to find a way to escape as far as possible without being found. The girl doesn't know exactly how to do this, but she understands that it's also very important. A maid washes Her Majesty's hair, trying to be as neat as possible. The girl asks what day it is today and is told it's already May 19th. Such a date means it's warm outside, which means there's still quite a bit of time left. Raniero and Serafina met in the freezing winter when he arrived for the meeting. As is known, in the original story, in the middle of winter, the emperor met the saint in the temple of Tunya and after that decided to act immediately because he liked her. 7 months isn't such a short time. You have to try not to show your fear, which is really creeping up on you. No one knows what might happen in such a long time, so the only conclusion is to be extremely careful. Until that night, all I remembered about Angelica was her name. Nothing else was known due to the new person occupying my body. The very next day, this character's memories were transferred to my head. The girl is the second princess of the kingdom of Unro. She has an older brother, an older sister, and a younger brother, all of whom look roughly similar, just like the rest of the family. The fact that the heroine remembered her family relationships is a good sign. Angie is a member of the royal family, so she must have learned the basics of geography and history. The girl herself has a wealth of information to supplement the original story. With this knowledge, it will become clear which country should be the place to flee to. It should be a country whose borders are close to the palace, and the location shouldn't be hostile to the empire or heavily guarded. It doesn't matter whether the state is strong or weak, because it can always be exchanged for something more prestigious in the future. Life is much more important than comfort. The empire will fall by spring anyway, so where she'll have to live for the next 6 months isn't that important. The beauty hopes everything will work out perfectly, just as she's planned in her head. Serafina, the protagonist of the original story, is the holy knight Eden, her unrequited love, and the story's protagonist is Raniero, a brilliant but despotic monarch who truly doesn't care about anyone. If a man kills a holy knight, then the path to disaster will follow Saint Tunia. After such an act, an empire that depends entirely on a remarkable monarch will fall. Nothing will remain of everything that took millennia to build. For now, the main goal remains exactly the same as before. The girl must survive and gather her strength to organize herself as best as possible in the situation she has found herself in. The headmaid, interrupting her usual stream of thoughts about the future, calls out to Her Majesty. The Empress must eat, and breakfast has already been prepared for her, still warm. While wine is being poured into the glass, the girl thinks only about whether she is allowed to eat in such comfort in her room without meeting with her husband, who is not pleasing to her. The maids, it turns out, are much more professional than most books or novellas portray. They try to ignore everything, simply doing what they're told and what they're supposed to do. No one tries to befriend the queen or please her. Such relationships maintain a perfect distance. The girl plans to escape to freedom, but if she gets closer to either of them, serious trouble could arise, which, of course, is not something she wants to experience. Looking down at her plate, the queen realizes it's best to do nothing that might hinder her escape. The best option is to act like a cold-blooded empress who doesn't care about anyone, just like her husband. Looking up, the lady tries not to smile too much as she asks the question that interests her. She's been in the palace for quite some time now, but no one has yet said their names. The brunette steps forward, bowing her head. She's a little late with her greeting, so she apologizes almost immediately. Her name is never revealed, but it's said that the woman is the mother of Marquis Jacques, well known in Actilist circles. Next in line is a beautiful blonde with neat hair pulled back into a bun. She is Count Locke's wife, and her name is Moran. The greeting is perfectly normal, as after her name, she always adds, "It is a great honor to serve the majestic empress." Suspicion creeps into my mind almost at the speed of light. Marquises, countesses, and duchesses are gathered here, and the strange thing is that each of them is from some noble family. Not the kind of ordinary family one might come from to serve in the palace. A feeling of discomfort lingers in the girl, seemingly paralyzing her body. She looks around, but trying to hide her discomfort, she fails to notice obvious things that are actually difficult to notice, only for her. Clearing her mind, Angie thanks everyone for their hard work. Everything around her feels new, so she'd appreciate some guidance until she gets the hang of it and can start doing everything on her own. After this, the lady merely nods. This answer suits the queen perfectly, so she smiles. The first thing she has to do is ask the girl what her plans are for the day. The marquise assures that there are no official meetings scheduled for this day. After breakfast, you can rest or go for a walk, which is also considered a form of relaxation. If all is well, then the queen will take a day off. She's planning to settle in a bit before the workload gets too much and the weekdays get busy. With 7 months to go, Unro can afford to take at least a day off. The next day, it all happened again. The brunette, who arrived early in the morning, said without even asking that the beauty had absolutely nothing to do. Only a few days passed, but each one passed at the same pace. Every morning, the maid would say there were no lessons and suggest they rest or do other things. The realization came too late, but the empress had absolutely no important matters to attend to. All day long, she spent nothing but enjoying the company of herself and the maids, who occasionally dropped by to check on her. Now it became clear what that strange feeling had been haunting the beauty on her very first day. It took her several days to realize that the maids simply weren't letting Angelica work. It was as if they didn't want her to mess up and get punished. It's clear that nothing special was demanded of the empress, but there will still be questions about this. Examples include the inspection of various departments, the approval of the palace budget, and her friendships with noble ladies and other people. The girl needed to review her documents for the past year before she could begin any work. The queen never thought she'd be the first to ask for such a thing. The maids are true professionals. They behave politely to avoid being caught, and if a beautiful woman speaks up about the problem, she'll be the only odd one out, embarrassed. No one accepts the girl, so she's treated like an outsider. In fact, this attitude is starting to get incredibly irritating. While it's possible to relax peacefully without worrying about what's going on in the palace, it's impossible to continue in this vein. Angie brought with her a maid who had been with her back at her home estate. She was the first to learn that her mistress was marrying Emperor Actilus, and she refused to believe it until the very end, wanting her to be happy without such a tyrant. That girl's name is Sician. According to others, they were very close, so knowing this and remembering it was incredibly helpful. The book didn't even mention the Empress herself, let alone a supporting character like that. The next day at breakfast, the beauty decided to raise the issue of her maid. She remembered that she had been brought to the castle, but no one had seen her since, as the head maid had asked her not to think about it for several days. The question strikes the woman like a bolt of lightning. She freezes, fixing her mistress with a strange gaze. It becomes clear that she wants to say something, but before she does, she's carefully sorting through her options in her head. To become a worthy servant of Actilus, one must undergo repeated training. Bringing a girl from another country doesn't mean she'll be worthy of work in the country where she currently resides. The heroine nods. She understands that this option, though lengthy, nevertheless explains what's going on around her. The only question is why no one has said anything. There's no answer, because all that's heard is a deafening silence. If Angie Raniero were her, she'd get an answer almost immediately. Deciding to start a conversation on her own, the blonde assures that she has nothing against it. But if she is the owner of that girl, then she has every right to know what is going on and where the worker is being sent without her knowledge. The woman asks to be brought in so she can see her friend. The brunette pretends to groan, justifying everything by saying that her mistress didn't ask anything, which meant she already knew everything. This cunning fox decided on her own that it was time to start the duel. A sly smile, disguised as a sweet one, appears on her face. The queen says it's her fault, thereby admitting defeat. That's how it seems to others, but in reality, the battle is only just beginning. This servant is fed by her own pride. So, if we follow the logic, she will not be able to say anything against it if the queen herself deigns to apologize. A mug of water lands with a thud on the table. It spills a little, but no one pays attention. The woman is furious because she thought the girl was completely clueless. But she turned out to be a monster. Marquis Jacques asks his mother to calm down. He looks from the water, which has completely spilled across the table, to his interlocutor, asking her to tell him what really happened while he was away from the empire. That girl tried to fight the head servant. She came from a small country and should know her place. Instead, the new queen is trying to win the trust of the others, thinking she can do anything. Marquis Jacques' sister arrives at the sound of the scream. She quietly opens the door, asking what's wrong. The girl's name is Sylvia, a beauty with white hair that reaches her waist. The mother sighs, shaking her head heavily as if she's been made to worry even more than before. If her daughter had become empress, she certainly wouldn't have had to worry so much. She failed in her position because someone else was chosen. No one ever objected to this child becoming the emperor's wife. Her own family literally pushed Sylvia to get rid of her as quickly as possible, as everyone understood that Raniero was a restless man, difficult to handle. A multitude of people lined up, too numerous to even count. Each of them wanted the Marquis to nominate a candidate for the role of empress, thereby saving their daughters from a similar fate. As much as I hated that maiden ascending to the throne, the second princess of the Unro kingdom did. No one even knew she existed, but now she sits in her chambers in the imperial palace, untroubled. It was a shame her daughter had missed her marriageable age while awaiting His Majesty's reply. The woman was shocked to see the girl, who had been fortunate enough to become the new ruler, looking at the maid with fearful eyes, practically screaming that this was not the best outcome. In any case, the choice was made by the emperor. There's no point in hating him so much because the ruler is the most important person in the empire, and therefore is free to do exactly as he sees fit, as long as the people don't protest, pointing out the error. The brunette snorts with a disgruntled expression. That worthless girl must have incredible skills in bed, since the man chose her. Sylvia once again asks her mother to be careful with her words. The anger at the response quickly manifests itself. The Marquise doesn't want to hear any of this because she had to wait so long for her daughter's value to only fall by half. Now, no future will be good. It's useless to try to achieve even the slightest thing to achieve a long-forgotten dream that will now never come true. The beauty understands this too, but she's not so saddened by such a trifle. Tears gather in the corners of her eyes, and her cheek begins to redden from the blow. Lady can no longer withstand this mental pressure, so she jumps up from her seat, running out the door in tears, slightly brushing against her brother. There's nothing to worry about. As is well known, His Majesty doesn't visit the Empress after midnight, which is a plus in itself, as they're not completely alone. The man is a deputy minister, and what's more, a marquise. The Emperor has absolutely no interest in that woman, so if he finds a pretext, he'll personally destroy her, leaving not a crumb behind. The young man's temper is explosive, so all the couple needs is a reason to blame the girl. This won't require much effort. The Marquise's mother smirked. That girl clearly had plenty of flaws, so finding and exposing at least one of them wouldn't be difficult at all. Even the king himself makes decisions based on personal gain. He cares about the people, but in times like these, it's best to do something good for himself. He has one principle he adheres to and never changes. Anything that harms the country must be eliminated immediately. This is precisely why the empire is experiencing a period of unprecedented prosperity, as all those who ever wished or wished evil were long ago destroyed by the hands of the young man. Now, as the hero had already told his mother, he needed to find a pretext, so he would be tasked with this himself. The best option would be to frame the new empress, forcing the empire to welcome a good man again. After a while, it was time to approve the budget. This authority rests solely with the emperor and empress, who usually distribute it fairly rationally throughout the empire. Now the queen doesn't work at all. She's become so accepted as one of the family, she's forced to sit in one place all day, terribly bored by everything going on around her. Tea parties have become her only entertainment. The girl is wandering around looking for her maid, who has begun training. Everyone should understand that this is an obstacle to Actylus's prosperity, one that can be eliminated very soon. Cecian returned. The next few days passed peacefully as the heroine continued to do nothing, accompanied by her good friend and assistant. As expected, the girl knows Angie and her preferences very well, so she has never made a mistake in what the mistress needed or in what she requested, but was wrong. Meanwhile, the Marquise's mother's bullying continued. The woman still couldn't calm down after that incident, which had clearly worsened the situation, making everything much more damaging. The queen decided to ignore such antics. There was no time to be childish and upset at anyone when she only needed to be upset at herself for being transferred to this book. The ridicule wasn't the only problem. The girl had become so isolated from everyone else that she didn't notice the storm that was brewing, which would eventually destroy almost everything in its path. Now it's too late to wonder where and how the water flowed. The beauty stands on one knee, bowing her head along with the Marquis and his mother in the throne room, where Raniero is also present. The emperor suddenly decided he wanted to see his wife, so he summoned her. He had to ponder for an hour to figure out what had gone wrong, but he couldn't reach any conclusions. Most likely, the fault lay with one of the other maids. Since everything had led to this, the girl decided to bend down lower. She lowered her head to the floor, surprising everyone in the room. She didn't want to get into more trouble or die due to carelessness. The blonde chuckles, the empress bows her head, not even understanding what's happening, which is also a little amusing. The hero is not in the mood for jokes or even taunts. The young man asks if everything is all right with her legs, to which she nods. Everything is fine, but it was done out of fear and respect. The girl genuinely didn't want anything to happen. Since everything is going according to plan, as it should have been from the beginning, then the hero snaps his fingers, saying that they can begin discussing the problem because of which they all gathered in the hall. Marquis Jacques introduces himself. He prepared the budget and its distribution for the third quarter, but a problem arose. There was confusion over the distribution of funds at Her Majesty's palace, and this is something worth discussing. Without raising her head, the lady merely cast a puzzled glance at the Marquise. She had never heard of a budget being distributed by anyone other than the king of the state. Actylus turned away once again, still dissatisfied. He asked no questions and gave the order to proceed without delay so that what was going on would become clear as soon as possible. The Empress is very bold. She has no shortage of impudence, so even a man can't understand what they were thinking in the palace when they considered her part of the family and allocated such a large budget that needed to be cut. The brunette bursts forward, saying that the woman was indulging in dichotomies instead of tending to the palace. She was doing everything but doing things right. The blonde froze, surprise on her face. She expected to hear anything, but certainly not something like this, since she considers herself innocent of simply following everything. The young man doesn't stop talking. Since the lady had no intention of fulfilling her duties, a fee was established for officials to perform their duties. Clearly, the Marquis's mother didn't ask him to do business just for the sake of it. It turned out that enormous sums of money were being spent on entertainment. The ministers turned a blind eye. But in such a case, the young man could not remain silent about what was happening. The catastrophe has begun. The Empress understands that almost everything being said is a lie, but she has no way to defend her position because the Emperor is in the room and would simply blow her head off for it. All this time, the maids bullied the girl, while only Cician stood by her side. who was always there and intended to help her mistress as much as possible. The blond man looks directly at the Marquis, remaining completely silent for several minutes, as he himself isn't obligated to follow his rule and answer quickly. The man asks what the young man intends to do. Brunet continues to play to the crowd, claiming he has absolutely no agenda. He can't dictate what should be done or pass judgment that won't be carried out. The hero is loyal to the empire, so he simply wanted to notify the ruler of the violation of the rules. From then on, as always, the final say will rest with the prince, who will, of course, do everything correctly. Raniero laughs lightly. He shouldn't be making a decision on such a matter. After all, it's rather petty and unimportant. The Marquis is keen to hear the opinion of his superior, so he repeats it again to better understand the intentions. Actilus is genuinely concerned about his country because he wants to remain in power. And so the current situation is somewhat dangerous. The Empress remains on the sidelines so as not to interfere where it doesn't belong. For this man, the boring one will be guilty and the cheerful one will be the best. He falsely believes that the girl is terribly careless to ask for such an absurd amount, and that the problem can be solved by simply revising the budget and changing the paperwork. If these two tried to convince Raniero with such a boring option, it would lead nowhere. Reading the novel, the young lady noticed how issues were sometimes resolved, and she realized she needed to take action. The girl can't accept the fact that she's the only one who understands a man's mind. She's seen him from the reader's perspective, so perhaps she knows exactly how to approach him and from what angle. The servants believe Raniero is a cruel man, seeking pleasure but genuinely caring for his country. In reality, things are quite different because the hero has his own motives. It's clear from his gaze that he'll be angry if you don't show him something interesting. He's already on edge, so this might not end well. The girl apologizes for her immoral and impudent behavior. Of course, she should have discussed the budget with the hero first. His Majesty truly had to endure the tedious experience of trying to allocate the budget, so some entertainment was needed to lighten the mood. The boy's eyes light up with joy and anticipation. It's noticeable even from the sidelines, as he's clearly interested in the new proposal. The girl steps forward to say they need to go on a human hunt. The hunt will be for specific people, and the prey will be these 3 people gathered in the hall. At these words, Marquis Jacques literally jumps up from his seat and, with fear in his eyes, asks what they're talking about. The hero is apparently so intrigued that he doesn't even notice the young man's protests. He asks the woman to continue, to drive her point home. As is well known, all inhabitants of the Actilus Empire are descendants of Actila, the god of war. In such a country, anyone can become a soldier, possessing the necessary skills to defeat all others. Humans would be the perfect prey for such a proposed entertainment. The girl realizes that her best option is to go all the way and get her husband to agree to a contest that would depend on the lives of others. Hunting people is a method from the original story. Angie knew the hero was interested in such things, having reread the novella before putting it away and entering a new, unknown world. The only downside is that the lady will also have to become prey. She's already decided to go all in, so she's gathering her strength to stake her claim. As the young man knows, the girl has an illness, especially since she only recently moved to Actilus. It's no fun having to deal with poor health, especially when hunting. It wouldn't be a good idea to release a sick rabbit into the hunting grounds when you could wait for another chance. It turns out the beauty has no intention of participating. She quickly declares that such a thing shouldn't have even been considered, as it would have been an honor to become a splendid catch on the summer hunt, which will take place very soon. By winter, the girl will be an excellent catch, so she plans to take care of her health, which will be in perfect order. To avoid missing out on the potential fun, it's best to postpone the hunt for Angelica. Jacques finally starts talking again. He immediately starts shouting because he believes such activities are completely absurd and shouldn't be carried out in real life. Everything should be exactly like this. The young man believes it's foolish to try to find joy where it doesn't and can't exist. To avoid angering the ruler, his wife steps forward to ask if the Marquis is truly so concerned with rationality, which is currently irrelevant. The same goes for the budget issue. The girl plans to discuss it as quickly as possible, but in a way that will make the brunette look like a fool in front of her own husband. Then everything will be fine. If the man had gone to the Empress immediately and realized what was wrong, there would have been no need to bother His Majesty. He didn't consider what he could do in the meantime, which wasn't the best option. There is still discontent burning in her eyes. But in order to bring the young man to the end, the beauty is going to try with all her might to make everything as good as possible. To compensate for the damage that has been done and to remove the boredom that has entered the hall, each of those present is obliged to become prey, because then His Majesty will be able to have a great time forgetting past grievances. The words finish, and at that very moment, the blonde man sitting on the throne smiles. For the first time, the Empress has made the right decision and chosen an excellent option, so he begins clapping his hands. Opportunities must not be missed when they are so close. Jacques still can't get over it. He'd hoped to drag Unro into the mud, but in the end, it didn't work out, because she managed to wriggle out of it. The young man asks not to force his elderly mother to do such cruel things, but instead to punish him as much as necessary. Harsh things aren't the most applicable at this moment and in this context. The Empress expressed herself clearly, so if they listen, they understand that becoming prey is a great honor for lowly people like all of them. As the girl said, the three of them were guilty of what they had done. The heroine was extremely stupid, but only because she couldn't dissuade the Marquise and the maid from coming to this hall and couldn't persuade them to try to resolve everything peacefully. No one is willing to do such a thing just to settle a dispute with a queen who only cares about herself, as she should. The screams continue as the man and woman are dragged away by several knights. Raniero didn't do this lightly. He was aware of Marquis Jacques' feelings toward him, which is why he agreed to the offer so quickly. He didn't need someone who treated the young man ill in the castle and tried to plot against him. The boy's younger sister wasn't chosen for the role of Empress. The man himself must have known this would be the end, and he was plotting to disable Angelica since she couldn't be controlled the same way Sylvia had been. The king decided to do nothing. He didn't particularly worry about what he had to do, because he was convinced that everything happens for a reason. Everything will be fine only when you move forward, clearing your own path. If only the blonde from the Marquise family had become Empress, then the plot might have changed. No one knows yet how exactly this would have affected things, but there's no point in guessing. The young man places his finger under his wife's chin, indicating that she should raise her head higher. This man only compliments when he wants to, saying the offer was a good one. A second later, the hero leans closer and kisses the woman, trying to convey what he believes is important. She needs to hold on and not give up. A beauty never makes mistakes, and this is something the blonde undoubtedly appreciates. He wants people to perform all their duties perfectly while overcoming their own I can'ts. If Angie hadn't done this, she would have lost her head long ago. After these words, the hero abruptly picks the girl up in his arms. He looks her straight in the eyes, asking how long she plans to run away from him, and then walks straight toward his throne. Lowering her body onto the soft seat, Raniero listens to her attempts at protest. This place is off limits to everyone else, for it is the king's throne. Looking at the picture of his wife sitting there, Actilus laughs, as it's far too big for a little girl like this. The heroine lowers her head, biting hard on the inside of her cheek. It's difficult, but such gestures help her endure everything that's so bothersome. At the moment, the sensations haven't changed, and they're strange, because she feels like a dog being played with. Large palms reach up to the woman's head, and then lightly stroke the crown. Fingers carefully move lower, stopping at her cheeks to brush back her hair, while the young man asks if the woman likes this. She nods slightly, holding back a sigh. The next day, major changes took place in the Empress's castle. From the very morning, a commotion erupted, which the queen had to deal with alone after a month of unemployment. The first thing the Marquis's mother had to do was resign her position as head maid. He had become prey just like she had been, so she was no longer allowed to remain in that position, no matter how much she wanted to. The vacant position seemed like a burden to the imperial maids. No one wanted to take on so much responsibility. However, over time, everything was quickly resolved. Sisian, who was happy to help her friend, took over the post. There were no other volunteers, so the girl was glad the maid had found the courage to do such a thing. Smiling, but trying to hide her bad mood, the lady apologized for having neglected her friend almost all this time. The brunette bowed her head. She didn't want to hear an apology because it was pointless. It wasn't Her Majesty's fault because not only was Sisian treated like a stranger, but the lady herself didn't deserve it. The blonde nods and turns away. The maid doesn't seem to notice, so this is a good sign to take advantage of. In her head, the young woman apologizes for pretending to be a mistress despite coming from another world. Everything was going well, but that didn't mean nothing bad was happening. With the change of headmaid, rumors spread, which only contributed to the improvement. The Empress was no longer looked down upon as she had been under Jacques' mother, who had turned everyone against her. The blonde, looking at the flowers, asks God what exactly she should choose. She's not that picky, so there's no point. A bright yellow would suit her. It complements her hair and fair skin. The heroine nods vigorously. She promises to take note of even such minor details, in order to try to make the choice easier for the Empress in the future, who already has too much on her plate. The girl considers herself an ordinary person. She changed after everything happened, becoming a high-ranking official. But that didn't change anything. The beauty remains a reader who knows the original novel well. After what happened, the girl only became more worried. Rumors about what happened to Marquis Jacques must have already spread, which wasn't the best option. The heroine tried to be a good girl, but it didn't work. Rumors truly do have great power. Sometimes it's impossible to comprehend, but in this story, the woman managed to grasp this quite quickly because she had committed just one act that would now determine her fate. After this incident, everyone in high society began to regard Angelica as a hot-tempered and arrogant queen who cared for no one but herself. Such a person would be an excellent match for the emperor. At first, the girl was very worried about what was happening, but in the end, there was nothing wrong with it. Virgo was simply fulfilling Angie's duties, and besides, the days were quite difficult. Trouble began to arise on the second day, so the beauty quickly grew tired of her duties. The duties of a ruler turned out to be much more difficult than they initially seemed. Sisian tried her best to support the girl throughout this time, but so far nothing has happened. The beauty is certain that this is all because the mistress has not yet become accustomed to life here and is only trying to adapt. Some time has passed since the heroine found herself in a completely new body. She hasn't yet had time to realize the potential she was given, as nothing is known, given that the novel didn't specify what Unro usually did in her free time or on work days. One of the Empress's most important duties is landscape planning and overseeing the garden. It's the simplest of tasks, but at the same time, it's quite tiring and draining. Next on the list are the salons and ballrooms, which also need planning and preparation. Even with the help of servants, this is a complex task that required a lot of time spent sitting at my desk in my office. Added to all this is the fact that the summer solstice is the most important holiday in Octilus, which means something grandiose is needed. We can't settle for simple options that won't even impress the people who demand it. The symbol of Actila's past life is the sun. As it turns out, this festival is celebrated during the summer solstice, when the sun remains at its zenith longest and the right time arrives. As she walked out into the street with her assistants, the girl paused. She was so lost in thought about the upcoming celebration that she didn't even notice the blonde standing right outside the palace entrance. The woman asks her subordinates who this girl is, but receives only silence in response. She doesn't like the idea of silence becoming a big deal, so her eyebrows lower, expressing displeasure. Sisian was the only one who finally dared to utter the guest's name. She was Sylvia Jacques, the younger sister of the Marquis, who had recently been sent out to hunt his prey by order of the king and queen. No one knows why the girl came to the palace. It turns out she's requesting an audience with Her Majesty the Empress, but that only makes matters more confusing. No further information was provided. The girl looks at Sylvia, who bows her head almost immediately. It's strange that so much time has passed since the verdict, but she only appeared now. Sisian explains the situation, The heroine requested an audience the very next day. Turning around, the beauty sighed in surprise. She hadn't expected things to turn out this way, but as experience had shown, this girl could be persistent. She had to wait 5 whole days without food or a bath, which dragged on far too long. After a few seconds of thought, the girl says they can let the guest in. She doesn't know what exactly she needs, but she'll find out very soon. As soon as the blonde is admitted, she falls to her knees again, greeting Her Majesty the Empress. She is the daughter of Roberta Jacques and the younger sister of Jacques. Her name is already familiar. Bowing her head, the queen listens to all the greetings, without interrupting, lest she appear too rude. It's too late to ask for anything, as 5 whole days have passed. The heroine truly regrets that the girl had to wait almost a week without food or baths. But if she came to beg for leniency, there's no point. She can leave immediately, so her hand points toward the exit. The girl shakes her head. Everyone reaps what they sow, which means her family is to blame for what they've been doing lately. Collecting her thoughts, the young lady seems hesitant, unable to choose the right answer, the one that would be most appropriate in this situation. Finally standing up, she says she recently learned that Roberta has been removed from her position as head maid. Instead of her deceitful mother, she could take the opportunity to hire Sylvia as her personal maid, who would serve her faithfully. It's hard to believe that the enemy's daughter wants to serve the queen. One could imagine anything, assuming the girl wants to plot against her friend, but this turn of events seems most absurd. In any case, what's going on in Sylvia's head is unknown to anyone. She may try to seize the opportunity to avenge her family and harm Angie while she's unguarded in the garden. Sadly, lowering her eyes, the heroine remains calm as she begins her persuasion. Everyone must understand that they are currently in no position to entrust such an important task to a maiden from a family of traitors. The blonde nods her head, growing more miserable. She understands everything they say, but continues to shake even more than before, like an aspen leaf. The queen is usually compassionate, so it's becoming increasingly difficult to control herself. The heroine no longer has any options. She was raised from childhood as the emperor's consort and the empress's servant, who would become her best friend. Most people who grow up locked up have no will of their own. Now that Sylvia's family has become prey, she has nowhere else to go. No one needs her, as only her brother and mother cared for her, and in truth, they wanted nothing more than to sell their own blood to the castle. The girl truly belongs to a fallen aristocratic family, and she truly has nowhere to go. If all other intentions are less than pure, this becomes especially clear and understandable in the current situation. Tears gather in the lady's eyes. They slowly roll down her cheeks and glisten in the sun, making them visible. It's painful to think about her family because in reality, her fate is already sealed and there's no way to change it. Despite how they treated their daughter and sister, they are still family and important. It's not the most important thing, no matter how you look at it, because the girl just wants to survive after losing everything due to her mother's stupidity. Unro watches Sylvia's emotional turmoil closely. She understands everything she says because she, too, wants to survive. Having found herself in a new world, at least somewhat familiar, the maiden still can't predict anything, so she fights for her freedom. Sylvia's story deeply moved the Empress. She tried to appear indifferent, but now, lying in bed at night, she thinks about everything that happened. The only one who could remain indifferent to such a thing is Raniero, who knows no weaknesses. The blonde has left a hole in Angie's defenses, but she doesn't know she can trust some strange character. No one knows what's on her mind, as she's still willing to help the family if the opportunity arises. The heroine promised to announce her decision soon, but for now, everything remains exactly as usual. It's impossible to change the thoughts in your head in a split second, no matter how hard you try. Sleep still eludes her, so Angelica decides to go to the window to clear her head and get some fresh air. Inhaling the scent of the flowers in the garden, she jumps suddenly as Raniero appears a centimeter away. Stepping back, the lady quietly asks what exactly brought the emperor to her chambers. He doesn't listen, only smirking, because apparently, screaming at night is another chronic affliction of the new wife, who behaves like this. The hero doesn't need a compelling reason to visit his wife. He has every right to do so he doesn't feel the need to explain. Approaching closer, the man lowers his hands to the sides of the woman's body, who looks at him with frightened eyes. The girl smiled slightly, though her mind had already begun to panic. It would be problematic if the young man kept dropping in on her just to talk or do something else. The plan would start to fall apart, which wouldn't be good. The perfect time to pay a visit has arrived. The maiden nods, but hopes her husband hasn't come to the estate out of a sense of duty. Looking down at his wife, the hero chuckled. He noticed Angie had begun to stutter, as if she were trying to avoid something that might inevitably happen very soon. She said nothing, but her face was once again filled with every thought. After these words, the blonde leans closer, kissing the beauty on the lips. She hums something in response, so, stepping back, the man asks if he should stop. Clearly, no one cares about the heroine's true opinion anymore. Saying thank you, the lady steps back a little, leaning against the railing. It's a relief that things aren't as bad as they seem. So the first question is how His Majesty's day was. The man was enjoying himself. For the first time in a long time, the days weren't monotonous and boring, just like usual. The hunters had already begun training for the competition, and 2 rules had even been added. The first is that the prey must also have a weapon, and if they survive for 3 hours, they win and are released. He added these rules without even consulting anyone, and now he's hinting at it, using it directly. A girl shouldn't be upset over such trivial things, so she smiles and declares that if a guy is happy, then nothing else matters. There's truth in those words. The Empress, too, had been busy all this time. During the day, she'd managed to compile a report and a plan for landscaping the garden near the palace. There were also other things she didn't have the courage to say anything about. The girl was silent for a few seconds. The hero interrupts his attempts to explain, saying he should bring that very person. He wouldn't do this just out of kindness, because it should actually be funny. The wife stands and looks at him with surprised eyes. She doesn't want to show her bad side, but it's clear that the man doesn't express his true thoughts in riddles, literally. This concerns Sylvia. If she participates as a hunter, it will help correct her past mistakes. In this way, the blonde will also prove her loyalty to the Empress, as she promised. The girl will be allowed to become a hunter like everyone else. She must kill her mother and brother with her own hands, without regret, just to survive in the dangerous environment. The idea was brilliant. The prince had long since realized that his wife was wondering whether her new acquaintance, who might have her own motives, would betray her. The worries of ordinary people are all too obvious. Pouring wine into a glass, the young man asks for Jacques to be brought to the palace. The condition is quite simple. If the girl proves herself a good hunter, she will be appointed a maid in the royal castle. Angie nods. This plan seems the best compared to all the other options. Even after this, it won't be 100% certain, but at least it means something. The man thought what he'd said would be a good idea, but he didn't like the look on his lover's face at all. If that was how she felt, then the emperor himself would give Sylvia the order to ease Her Majesty's heavy burden. It's hard for Virgo to talk about such things because she's too weak. She smiles, but secretly mocks the young man, because by his standards, he and all the other weaklings exist in this world, powerless to achieve anything in life. Raniero Actilis was born in a human body, but is actually a character who considers people to be useless flies who are worth nothing in life. There was nothing he could do but become a cruel man who would be respected. His childhood was hardly unhappy, but in any case, it didn't matter, because the boy was born pure evil, determined to conquer everyone around him. Now the man stands before the beauty, while she once again searches for an answer to the question of why she was the one sent to live with him. Ultimately, she will still be killed, no matter how hard she tries. The young man examines the scarlet stains spreading across his clothes. The girl is terrified, and this becomes clear almost immediately. She must immerse herself in pleasure and instantly forget all her fears. The girl stares back. She can't get what she's thinking out of her head because the young man truly is absolute evil. And he's also one of the strongest and most beautiful men in the world, given his looks. Everything will be fine, because this time the lady will try not to make any stupid mistakes that could harm her health and life. The hero pulls his wife along with him and then allows her to lower herself onto the bed. Everything happened exactly as planned. The girl turns away, staring blankly at the wall, but someone taps her on the shoulder. In the hero's opinion, she's completely impotent, especially given her body size. Becoming a great hunter with a body like that will be his biggest challenge. The young man doesn't understand what he's about to do, but he doesn't think about what he's saying to his wife, who tries not to react. The lady completely forgot that she was to become the emperor's prey in winter. In fact, the heroine had no intention of becoming anyone's prey, as she had already devised an escape plan. At first, things won't be going well, but once the man sets out on an expedition, everything will fall into place. There, he'll meet Seraphima, and he'll never again look for Angelica, who he'll lose all interest in. The hero never told the woman about the second rule, which had only recently been adopted. The girl must also become a hunter, otherwise, nothing will work properly. She's not quite fit to take on this task, but she has no choice. The blonde immediately tries to reassure the girl so she doesn't get even more worried. There definitely won't be any problems, but the only rule they've agreed on is best not broken to avoid getting into trouble. Raniero would also become a hunter, which stunned the beauty even more than the proposal itself. Sylvia wouldn't survive an encounter with this evil, and after her death, she would take her friend along with her on her journey so that things wouldn't be so boring. Actilus understands that the rules are meaningless. He added them all knowing they were meaningless, so he took a different approach. Knowing exactly what was needed and how it could be played, he did everything he could to lure his wife into his trap. Trying to pull herself together so as not to show her confusion and fear even more, the beauty, hiding the trembling in her voice, asks when exactly the hunt, which had obviously already been scheduled, would take place. The hunt will open on the summer solstice. The girl will likely be very busy, as she's ultimately responsible for the festival scheduled for that day. She's been putting together plans that could be put into action then. There was only a month left until the event. The beauty had originally planned to befriend the nobles in anticipation of the celebration, but all social events had been canceled for some reason. Instead, preparations began for how to defend themselves and try to survive. Even Marquis Jacques' mother, who is obliged to ensure their survival, is involved. No one wants Roberta to succeed. Watching the man and woman battle, the lady gasped once again. She was allowed to observe the training for a while, so she came to the scene. Those two are clearly talented, and it's reflected in the way they move deftly around the field. As is well known, all residents of the Actilus Empire, including women and children, study martial arts so that they can be called up for war at any time. This will bring great benefit to the state and honor to those who go there. The maid noted that the queen had initially neglected her training, but that everything changed after Her Majesty visited the girl the previous evening. He did everything he could to change her mind for the better. Duchess Nemra informs the lady that a search has already begun for a new, excellent teacher who can do everything perfectly. The girl is delighted, but no matter how good the teacher, it's impossible to achieve something like this in a month. While pondering what exactly she could do to win even the slightest privilege, the woman suddenly mentions that she needs to learn how to use a bow. If she has to fight in close combat, a quick death awaits the character, so she needs to keep her distance and remain in control. Clutching the Duchess's hands, the girl literally begs to be allowed to learn how to use a bow. She won't be able to prove herself among the very best, but ultimately she'll survive, which is what matters most. On the very first day of training, the beauty was incredibly tired. The bow turned out to be much heavier than it initially seemed, so she didn't properly assess her abilities and physical strength. Nemra apologizes for her impudence in advance, but she understands there's some truth to her words. In all the time she's been training others, she's never heard anyone say the bow is too heavy, even from a 10-year-old child who handled it with ease. The girl pulls herself together and gets up from the ground. She needs to try again and again to achieve anything worthwhile. It's a shame, but she's different from the people of Actilus, who possess great strength, sturdy bodies, and the stamina to persevere. On the next day, I need to try to hit at least close to the target. We'll see how the training goes, but for now, there's only one goal, and it seems almost out of reach. Virgo isn't about to make any grand plans or hopes, but she still shoots the arrow forward. It would be nice if her training paid off. helping the heroine reclaim her life on this summer hunt. Silence reigns in the throne room. The blonde man glares at Sylvia, but then begins to speak. He's already heard that the girl wants to become the Empress's handmaiden, but she probably doesn't realize the position she'll accidentally put herself in. The heroine understands everything and hopes she can do something to succeed. The king announces one condition. Most likely, after this, she will be able to become the Empress's personal servant, but the condition is that she must become a hunter. The reaction is predictable because her eyes widen in surprise, and the girl even begins to stutter slightly. The blonde knew this would happen, so he chuckles again, thinking about the weakness of the people around him. Summoning the guards, the young man orders the girl taken away, who tries desperately to slow down, trying to speak. Turning to a servant, the king inquires about the Empress. All events have been canceled, leaving plenty of time to prepare. As the butler learned, the young lady chose her own career. She's attempting to learn archery, thereby developing her endurance and strength while wielding a weapon. It also became known that the Empress had lost consciousness. What this means is unclear, but for now, the Emperor is not at all pleased with this beginning. He is counting on the woman to become stronger, at least with time. Her eyes slowly open. It feels like someone poured lead into them because her eyelids are so heavy. The first thing she notices is the bed, so she quickly realizes she must have fainted during one of her workouts. Trying to sit up, the lady made sounds that came out of nowhere in pain. She should have listened to Duchess Nirma and stopped in time because now her entire body literally ached from how tense it had been just recently. Angelica was a princess, so the heroine assumed she'd learn to ride horses and gain strength over time. Unlucky, as the girl had been weak since childhood, which reflected her current condition. The girl said all this out loud, so the blonde man sitting next to her asked why his wife was talking about it as if she couldn't remember anything from her early childhood. He appeared out of nowhere and so suddenly that it startled her. Realizing it was time to start making excuses, the heroine declared that she hadn't expected to change yesterday. The king thought something terrible had happened, but it was just a minor setback that made no sense. The man himself never imagined that the girl would lose consciousness from the simplest endurance training. It might be considered strange, but he can only be grateful for the concern. The Empress is still pale. Even after waking up, the boy lets go of her chin, hoping he'll be able to read all the emotions he needs. The girl simply wants to rest, so she waits until the young man moves away. No matter how much the hero ponders, it becomes increasingly clear that the beauty is too stupid. She's tired, but in this case, it's best to take a break and rest peacefully if there's time and opportunity. A man as complete a predator as hers can't fully understand a woman who doesn't even hope for help. She collapsed on the training ground, simply from exhaustion that struck at the most inopportune moment. In this country, they can't comprehend that people might not possess the same strength as them. Everyone here was born with good physical abilities and even began training as a child. Virgo understands that if she's tired, it's best to simply rest and not try to do her own thing. She's trying her best not to die, but for now, she's being blamed for every misstep. Noticing the tears he had to brush away almost immediately, the young man nodded. He reached out to straighten the girl's hair, simultaneously asking the maid to bring cold water and silk towels for the compress. It seems the Empress is very ill. The hero promises to take care of his beloved's health, but the madness in his eyes makes it clear that this may not end well. After fetching the things, the hero dips the towel in the water and then, without wringing it out, places it on the queen's face. Water immediately begins to drip down it, so, noticing this, the blonde man asks if the towel is wet. To avoid being caught in the crossfire, the lady assures him that everything is fine. His Majesty's methods aren't working. Instead of continuing to do everything wrong and cause harm with his methods, Raniero calls for a servant to take good care of Her Majesty, the Empress. As it turned out, the girl's physique affected not only the slowness of her training, but also the illness. Because of her physique, her temperature rose with just a little movement. Actilus had never encountered anything like it before. The maid tries to explain more about what exactly needs to be done and how. This is all because the beauty is too weak. Her body resists when she does what she can't, causing everyone around her to suffer. Chuckling, the hero once again reminds the woman that she's an extremely pathetic creature. Such a damaged, sickly appearance makes one want to run away as far as possible, because the prince himself is starting to get incredibly irritated by it. Raniero's sitting position is unlike any other he usually uses for comfort. Every detail screams that the maid is available, but for some reason, she doesn't react. The girl realizes she must take matters into her own hands, so she asks a maid to bring her something to eat because she's hungry. 10 minutes later, a bowl of soup arrives, ready for her to eat. The king spoon feeds the queen, noting that even her mouth is too small. After finishing his meal, the hero remarks that he will have to remain at the palace tomorrow. His words might be misinterpreted as concern directed at the woman, but this is absolutely not the case. The young man wants to watch the training sessions, which are going one worse than the other. He doesn't fully understand what he's saying, but he doesn't want to listen to any protests that will bore him. Initially, Raniero hoped it would be amusing to watch Roberta escape. He hoped it would end like every hunt, but if it continued like this, the hunter would become the prey of those defending themselves. The bowl of soup is finished and pushed away. The young man feigns a sigh, saying that, as he thought, his wife won't be able to entertain the guests or her husband himself on a winter hunt. Such an event would be fatal for a fragile, unprepared body. The hero wants to know what he'll get in return for the long wait, which has already worn him out. This time, the woman succeeded in becoming a hunter, but in just 6 months, she'll have to switch sides and become the hunted, leaving her with no choice. There's no choice, so Angie just needs a little time so she can lighten her load a little in the future. The girl plans to escape before Raniero meets Serafima, but until then, she needs to somehow create the illusion that she's about to become prey for everyone else. She needs to maintain the illusion. Jumping up to sit up in bed once again, the lady asks him to believe in her strength because they are already looking for a mentor together so that the training will be of some use. Otherwise, nothing will work, no matter how hard they try. If the girl fails to pull off her scam, she won't be able to continue. For now, she's trying her best to convince the boy that everything will be fine and that a mentor will be found very soon. Everything is going according to plan, and even the king himself is happy with it. Just a few buts remain, and then everything will end as it should. So far, Unro hasn't managed to find a teacher because the process is ongoing. If things drag on, they won't be able to learn the necessary skills in time. In that case, Raniero has no choice but to become the queen's tutor. She asks again, but quickly falls silent, unwilling to accept the consequences. The blonde promises she'll never forget how much time they spent on her. She promises to try her best, so very soon the young man will notice the first results, which will be visible on the line. The next morning, the heroine woke up free of the pain that had plagued her all day. The medication had worked, but perhaps that was also because the man had spent the previous night tending to his wife, trying to ease the pain. Actilus was around until around midnight. The maid said he only returned to his room at dawn to get some rest. She has no feelings about this, so the girl gets up to ask when she needs to be at training. Cecian lowers her head to the floor, confessing guiltily that she herself doesn't know exactly how or where to go to get to practice. She's immediately accused of knowing everything beforehand. Grabbing her bow, the lady quickly begins dressing and tying her hair. She needs to get to the field before Raniero, so upon arriving at the deserted site, she begins looking around. Most likely, the man never showed up, so the girl breathes a sigh of relief, glad that everything ended well. A menacing voice is heard from behind, wishing her a good morning. It's already past 10 o'clock, so the young man notices that the woman hasn't rushed at all. Allowing herself to get enough sleep, the king has been waiting for 2 hours now, but hopes this won't happen again. Changing the subject, the blonde man asks what his wife is holding. He knows the name of the weapon, but he doesn't understand why she brought it with her. Angie bows her head, exhaling heavily. Her body is still too weak, and even more so, her arms, which can only lift a bow, which just recently seemed like an unbearable burden. Raniero seems oblivious, asking if the maiden has ever considered using a weapon that's perfectly suited to a specific person. Everyone has their own tastes and colors. Angelica asked me to bring this bow myself. It's not as heavy as the previous one, making it easier to handle. Any bow is useless if the archer can't draw the string, which gets in the way. In fact, the lady is truly grateful. She wanted to find a teacher, but since Actylus himself had already volunteered to teach her, it was a tremendous honor bestowed upon a commoner. The man reaches his hand toward the young lady's face. Her cheeks had long since turned red, but only then did he realize she still had a fever. The medicine hadn't helped much, so in this case, exercising became almost impossible. Ignoring his wife's condition, the hero turns around, suggesting they finally get started on the training they've been putting off. He's not going to put off what can be done in advance. The hero didn't even scold Angie for being late, so they simply got down to business. An hour later, there was almost nothing left. The beauty had been influenced, so she was slung over his shoulder. Many people had been defeated in this manner. Raniero grew tired of target practice in less than 30 minutes. He proved to be a truly impatient man who couldn't figure out what he wanted from his student. After a while, the young man pulled out a wooden sword from somewhere, which had recently been put away when Her Majesty decided to practice with the bow. There was absolutely no time for preparation or mastering new material. The hero began attacking almost immediately because the best practice is real combat conditions, which help you focus. The girl hadn't expected this, so she was terrified. These weren't real swords, which had frightened her almost as much. So much so that she couldn't do anything about it, even though she tried her best to hold on. Her fencing skills turned out to be insignificant. This wasn't surprising, as the girl had never done anything like this before, but it was still a bit offensive to hear her fencing skills told to her face that she was insignificant. Every attack was unsuccessful. Hours passed, but nothing changed, because somehow the blonde man predicted exactly what the woman, who had long since run out of steam, would do. The movements they used could easily have slit a throat or done something else horrific. This would certainly have affected the girl's life in the upcoming hunt. The girl is constantly distracted. She looks at the sky to catch her breath, but it's no longer as if her eyes are failing due to some chronic illness. Eventually, Raniero began explaining the basics of fencing step by step, realizing there was no other way. One move and the girl would be dead. In a real fight, no one would spare themselves or their opponent. The first rule to remember was that you need to move your waist if you want to regulate the distance from your opponent. Proper use of the shoulders, elbows, and wrists is the key to controlling the sword's trajectory, which moves only forward. Ultimately, a whole list of what needed to be done to win emerged. The king constantly complains that he's tired of playing with such a frail man, but ultimately, he has no intention of stopping his training. He's determined to see his work through to the end. It's hard to believe that someone who can't stand the tedium of classes would agree to this. Perhaps there was an ulterior motive, but so far, my wife hasn't been able to figure out what exactly lies behind the mask of indifference. By the end of the day, she was completely exhausted, completely drained of strength. Keeping herself together so as not to faint again, the girl walked past and thanked the teacher for teaching her. From now on, she would try her best, even if it took a long time. No matter how large the Actylus Empire, rumors spread like wildfire. Even without an official announcement, rumors of the hunting festival spread throughout aristocratic society. As everyone knew, the festival would take place during the summer solstice, in a hunting ground. Sylvia Jacques, the emperor, and the empress would be the hunters who would hunt the known prey. Everything is going well. The queen hopes she won't accidentally screw up somewhere, so she's going to test her strength to the fullest. The only downside was that the beauty was injured during one of her training sessions, and the emperor spent a long time caring for her health. This man made one of his most fatal mistakes when he started all this. He also waited 2 hours for training, never scolding her. This surprised her on the first day, but over time it happened again and again, allowing her to get used to it. At the end of the training, Actylus presented her with a new bow, one that suited its owner. The only problem is that rumors actually spread much faster than anyone thought possible. Everyone around, from the capital's nobility to neighboring countries, learned of what had happened, and the palace maids became the initial source. There is nothing to be done, because that's the role of the empress's maids. Each one must be the best. It's better to conceal the truth and slightly embellish the emperor and empress. This gradually improves the girl's standing in social circles. Either way, in the end, nothing would matter, since the beauty was already planning to run away very soon. I don't want to become someone else's talking point because I need to try to do it at the first opportunity. For now, her duties are limited to playing the role of the emperor's amiable wife. No one knows when another Marquis Jacques will decide to show up and frame Angie so she'll be sent out of the castle posthumously. The maid, as usual, follows right behind her mistress. She enters her room, noticing a mountain of gifts that covers the entire wall. Everyone's eyes widen in surprise because no one can figure out what they are. Judging by the sheer quantity, it's safe to say that something similar was made for the entire empire, which deserved to be treated well. One of the maids sheds some light on the matter, saying that these are just a few of the gifts His Majesty sent. It takes time for rumors to spread even to the villages. The beauty smiles. It's not for nothing that the girl has been fawning over her mistress lately. She clearly wants something. The girl would have appreciated this attitude if this man hadn't previously served Roberta. Distracted from the maid, who remains restless, the maiden gazes at the mountain, at the very top of which lies a letter in which her husband says he can no longer wait for the real hunt to begin. The maiden doesn't know what she can achieve in just a month. Turning back to her friend, the lady asks when the hunting grounds will be ready. No one has yet given a precise date for the real competition, which awaits its participants. Angie is deeply worried. No matter how hard she tries, defeating the Jacques family won't be so easy. They've lived here since birth, so they've been trained in various sciences and defense techniques that will help them advance up the ladder to saving their lives. The girl tries to eat a lot of chicken salads to build muscle mass, but she knows it will all be in vain. If she can't win by force, then she should try to break through to victory with information, which she needs to acquire somewhere. The training only grew more brutal. His Majesty showed no mercy at all to the Empress, who quickly became exhausted. She fell to the ground again, trying to catch her breath and claiming she had absolutely no strength left to continue. The blonde, as always, treats everyone with disdain and skepticism. When he looks at a woman, he also has to wonder about the doubts of the human race, because the girl is too weak. This is the first time he's encountered such a person. She wants to respond to all the insults that are thrown at her so easily. But to keep her distance, she closes her eyes and remains silent. It's impossible to even count how many times she's lost, because the number exceeds 1,000. It's commonly said that genius doesn't extend to teaching others. Raniero merely reprimands each time a move goes wrong, and then, over time, forgets everything as if nothing had happened in order to help his wife move on. To take a short break, the young man suggests going to explore the hunting grounds. To get a full view of the forest, the hero leads the woman to an open area in the tower, where she is met with a breathtaking view. Her eyes light up with interest. It's long been clear that everything in the Actilus Empire is done on a grand scale. The land is magnificent, and that's undeniable, as the trees stretch out hundreds of kilometers from the castle. Lowering her head, the girl also studies the surrounding area, as this knowledge could be useful in battle. She notices in time that from this turret, she can literally see the other side of the world, making it perfect for a bow. Distracting his wife from his thoughts, the blonde man says he really did try for her, as if he's expecting some kind of praise. This is all clear, so the woman nods vigorously. She tries to do this as quickly as possible to avoid any unnecessary doubts. The lands were to his liking, and there's no need to ask why. They're so wonderful. At first, the king found it amusing to teach the woman as it provided a distraction from his tedious work. But the heroine proved so clumsy that now he felt unnecessarily uneasy. Actilus trained the woman, honestly, so he still hopes everything will end as planned. Angie became a hunter in the summer and promised to become a hunted woman in the winter, which was already quite intriguing from the start. The new rules were not adopted in vain. After that day of conversation, time seemed to speed up, moving twice as fast. Every morning, the queen trained with Raniero, who continued to raise the demands of the plan, and then from dawn until dusk, she spent her time preparing for the summer solstice. Her hand often went numb from the amount of writing. Sylvia tried to avoid Her Majesty's presence, and perhaps this would have upset Angelica, who wanted to know how she was doing, but had absolutely no time for that. Her own affairs always came first. After weeks of preparation, the young lady finally decided to take a rest. Just as she was deciding, Raniero showed up, determined to ruin the entire day. The maids, noticing the man, dispersed almost immediately, citing important matters. They're behaving like this again, afraid of messing things up. Now the lady is left alone with the monster, as if in a cage. The girl's distress is obvious. The young man can't ignore it, so he asks how she's feeling. In fact, it all stems from a fear that won't go away. Even though the couple began seeing each other daily, nothing has changed dramatically. The blonde man comes closer. He examines his wife's face, then calls her a defenseless rabbit. At this moment, she truly does look like a frightened child. Clearly, Unro has already made some kind of mistake. The woman literally laughs at the man with her searching eyes. They peer straight into his soul to grasp the edges of his consciousness and grasp his essence. The Empress has become too brazen, so the blonde man laughs. The girl quickly tries to justify herself. She doesn't want to be killed and didn't want to do anything wrong by using the wrong look. The young man compared her to a small, furry animal, which doesn't resemble his wife at all. The heroine isn't really like that, so she tries to explain herself. A good opportunity never presents itself because the blonde leans closer, kissing the beauty. He reaches for the zipper at the back of her dress to unfasten it. The kiss ends as abruptly as it began. Clumsiness is in the girl's blood, for the king has too quickly learned what the Empress likes and what doesn't quite suit her. It would be best to stop here. The man knows what the beauty was expecting, so he says he's sorry. She still doesn't understand what's happening, but he calmly undresses her and then, after putting on a new dress, leads her to the mirror so he can admire her beauty. The hero had recently been told that a dress is worn like this, without any extra clothing on the body, so he undressed the girl. It was all definitely worth it, because the beautiful lilac dress shimmers in the sun like jewels, attracting attention. Looking closely at her reflection, the girl quietly thanks her for the gift. It matches her hair color, something even the king himself noticed. He kisses the lady's hair, trying to be as gentle as possible. Hopefully, the garment will be worn on the day dedicated to the summer solstice. Leaning closer and grasping Angie's chin, the hero whispers a warning that if the lady dies during the hunt, the outfit will be abandoned. If she truly values it, she'll have to try hard to save it. June has finally arrived. Along with the warm month comes the summer solstice. On this day, the long-awaited hunt, which has been anticipated for a month, is scheduled to take place. Preparations are in full swing, but the real competition won't begin until midday. Since being transported to this novel, the girl's only goal has been survival. She doesn't want to die a senseless death, entirely through her own fault. So she hopes that this time, too, everything will go as smoothly as possible. To avoid forgetting, Angie begs herself to seize this last chance and not lose heart. There are only 6 months left, and if she can overcome this obstacle, the path is clear. The woman will be the first to flee, like a rat from a sinking ship. A Virgo woman goes out to meet her husband. Deep down, she hopes she's not late for at least this once. But as the situation proves, that's absolutely not the case. The man waited for about 2 hours, and that's about the usual amount of time. The beauty finds herself on her husband's lap. Her cheeks flush, but she continues to try to keep her composure. Anyone seeing this picture would conclude that the relationship is utterly happy, with no impact on anyone else. A crowd of people has gathered beneath the palace balcony, but no one is paying attention to what's going on. The young man asks about the girl's well-being, checking for the upcoming competition. Wanting to study the strategy in detail, he asks what Unro plans to do when he enters the hunting grounds. Virgo is pondering, but it's just a pretense. In reality, she's long known exactly what she needs to do to achieve her goal as quickly as possible. At the very beginning, she should run to the center to gain the highest position in the group. The heroine is determined to avoid a close-quarters fight for which she's physically unprepared. She smiles, but receives a laughter that spreads easily around her. Her eyes dim, as if she couldn't understand what was so special about what was said. With no choice, Angie tries to defend her honor and dignity. She explains that she tried to do everything as best she could and even managed to hold out for 30 seconds without giving up right away. The only response is yet another sneer. Actilus understands he shouldn't humiliate the woman, but he still reminds her that everything only worked out because he was moving terribly slowly. He wanted to give her at least some slim chance of victory, which he didn't even take advantage of. Conversations cease. A servant steps forward, the one who usually announces all holidays as they are due, by order of His Majesty. The brunette announces the beginning of the festival in honor of the summer solstice. The sun is blinding, so the Empress is unable to notice how the people are watching her every move. They also notice how the couple is holding hands, so they immediately assume it's a sign of idol. After all the greetings, a large crowd gathers for dinner. The girl eats nothing at all, and this draws attention. There's no time to worry, because after all, the beauty is so nervous about the upcoming hunt that she might simply not survive until morning if she ends up in the hunting grounds. The young man holds out a glass of wine, which catches the sun's rays pleasantly on the glass. He smiles, saying that this is a gift of sorts, something the Empress has earned for her courage and perseverance. For now, nothing is said about what exactly is in the glass. The girl takes the drink but treats it with a little suspicion. Raniero's seems to be a different drink. The color is different, as is the smell, which seems more intoxicating than usual. She squints to try to understand, but it's no use. She absolutely must drink it all. Orders must be obeyed, so without further hesitation, the girl downs the glass in one gulp. The blonde man just laughs. After all, the heroine would have drunk even the most vile thing if it had come from her husband and had been ordered to be carried out. A strange feeling instantly overwhelms her body. She has to sit back down in the chair to avoid falling to the floor. But even that doesn't work perfectly the first time. Virgo can no longer comprehend what's happening around her, as her arms and legs feel like they're on fire. Now more questions arise about what exactly she's been forced to accept. The people around her ignore the changes in the Empress, so they continue to dine and talk. The heroine leans on the man's shoulder for support. He asks her to calm down and be patient, as things will get much better soon. A second later, the heroine bursts into a ringing laugh that resounds throughout the hall and attracts the attention of the aristocrats, who did not think that the queen could behave in such a manner. Noticing their gazes fixed on her, the beauty asks each of them why they've all turned away from the delicacies skillfully prepared, especially for their esteemed guests. Madness is evident in their eyes. The king orders everyone to follow his instructions. Unro quickly slices the meat and then sinks his teeth into the piece. The steak tastes unusual, and all his senses are suddenly heightened, as if he can see and hear everything much better now. Licking her lips, Angelica assures everyone else that it's delicious. She's truly delighted to have tasted such a wonderful dish as this meat, which seems excellent. The satisfaction she's receiving is now evident in her eyes. From the moment Raniero gave her the wine, the girl has been plagued by strange, inescapable feelings. At first, her body felt warm and light, then heavy again, as if an additional weight had been placed on it. These fluctuations slightly affect her overall state. Now, instead of being nervous, you can begin the hunt. Any fear of doing something wrong simply vanishes, because now the maiden feels she can do anything, as long as everything goes well. The prey will regret ever setting out into the hunting forest. While the lady was pondering a strategy for how best to begin the battle, a maid entered the room and pointed to a strange purple artifact. It was a gift from His Majesty, which he requested be delivered urgently. Soleo is a purified form of a deadly poison produced by poisonous frogs. The prince said his wife already knew how to use it to her advantage in battle, so the maid simply bowed for now. Finally, the battle itself begins. It took several hours to get there, as other preparations had been made since early morning. The orator announces the Empress's arrival. Immediately after, a flood of praise erupts and a roar echoes through the stands. Stepping forward, the lady surveys the crowd. They've all gathered to watch a wonderful show and be entertained, but unfortunately, nothing will come of it. If you're outside the barrier, you won't be able to see anything. The prey is lurking in the hunting grounds. Jacques' family was already sent into the forest this morning, so finding them will be quite challenging. Ultimately, there's nothing terrible about it because the adrenaline rush is still coursing through their veins, keeping them going. Her eyes darting from side to side, the maiden accidentally notices Sylvia standing nearby. She's shaking with fear, but her best option is to pull herself together. She must prove herself worthy to become the Empress's handmaiden, otherwise, entry will be denied. There's no room for the faint of heart in such a cruel game. A few weeks ago, Sylvia knelt before the queen and pressed the pity that had truly appeared in the maiden's mind. Now, however, that pity at that moment seems false, for the girl isn't worth it. If the blonde demonstrates her ability to handle challenges and performs well, she will deserve a reward. Otherwise, no one will even consider what her future will be like after the hunting tournament. Next to enter is His Majesty the Emperor, who is greeted with an even more enthusiastic reaction. The man immediately heads to Unro to remind her that she will never die. He promises to do everything possible to ensure the lessons are successful. A moment later, the hunting grounds are already open. The order of entry into these territories is determined by status. First up is Sylvia, who takes hold of herself and proudly raises her head as she heads off into the forest, hoping that today she'll be lucky enough to do everything to her best advantage. The protagonist's eyes light up even more than before as soon as she sees the open gates. She can't wait to get inside and start the game. Today, everything will definitely go as planned. Feelings of anticipation and delight are overwhelming, immersing the body in them. At this point, the couple is similar because the young man experiences roughly the same feelings, even without the addition of drugs that enhance them. First, as she promised herself, the lady heads to the tower. Her body is so light that she wants to jump, but she needs to focus on more important matters. The vantage point is good, so the forest is visible at a glance. To ensure victory was achieved quickly and the enemy died immediately, the girl took every precaution to ensure this. She coated the arrowheads with the poison Raniero had given her that morning. Now, all that remained was the technique. Unro needs to focus on his hearing. It's with his ears that he can hear the sound of one of his enemies trying to get closer. The bushes begin to rustle, but then Sylvia appears from behind them. The blonde looks down at the woman with hope in her eyes. The girl is about to say something, but she doesn't notice Roberta refusing behind her. She grabs her daughter by the hair to pull her back, looking angry. Everyone in this forest is determined to survive, through selection and protection. The woman begins shouting something about the sacrifice of the Marquise Jacques. She promises to bring her heart to the emperor so that he can reward the servant by allowing her to live on. The girl will be sacrificed to the god Actilla on the summer solstice. This holiday even sounds somewhat poetic, considering the occasion. Thanks to this, the brunette will surely survive and later escape the empire. This is obviously the secret trick the Jacques family has been preparing. Nothing will work unless they take action, so the beauty takes aim once again, drawing the bowstring. She tries to ensure the arrow hits Roberta, who is so preoccupied with her conversations that she doesn't notice the queen on the tower. The girl finally lets go of the arrow, and it whistles through the air, streaking off into the distance. Instead of hitting the target, the weapon misses, as her hand twitched slightly at the last moment. The brunette looks up to spot Unro. She's about to climb up as she needs to deal with the Empress, but it's no use. Sylvia throws herself at her mother, allowing them both to fall to the ground, unable to move forward. The mother wants to kill the girl to survive, but she never thought about Sylvia herself. The heroine also wants to live more than anything else, and for this she won't hesitate to sacrifice her deceitful family. A medium-sized stone appears in her hands, which she swings. The blonde begins to strike, channeling all the rage she's accumulated over time. Jacques is confident he can win and find a new home where she can feel comfortable without the constant abuse from her family. Raniero will regret not having witnessed the spectacle that just unfolded. The lady descends the steps, hearing that Sylvie is presenting the body as a trophy. Now it's Her Majesty's spoils, and she'll claim it all for herself simply by making her acquaintance her servant. Smiling, the girl praised her subordinate. Her behavior was admirable, considering the show had truly been impressive. Her eyes sparkled with the trust that was slowly beginning to develop. The brunette is still alive, but the Empress fixes that. She sets her blade to rest, finishing what needed to be done. One could rejoice, but unfortunately the battle is not over, for Marquis Jacques himself remains. He emerges from the forest with an axe, calling out to Roberta. Henry realizes he's the only one left alive among the victims. He ignores everything, tucking his emotions away, and draws his weapon. A strange laugh echoes around him, but the girl reacts instantly, drawing her bow. As the man lunges forward, the lady fires one of her arrows, striking her squarely in the shoulder. The poison should begin to spread, so it won't be long now. Her body suddenly feels hot. The beauty clutches her heart, trying to breathe, but somehow she can't. The pain is so intense that it feels like her muscles are about to burst. Angie tries to rush into battle because the young man doesn't consider surrender an option. But after the first blow, she's knocked back, falling to the ground. She doesn't understand what's happening because for some reason her body has suddenly become inert, entering the state. The girl cowers on the ground but makes no attempt to rise. She quietly calls for help. All she can see is a man raising his weapon, shouting that her mother's enemy will be destroyed quickly. The heroine doesn't want to die, so she only becomes more afraid. At the perfect moment, Raniero appears from behind and stabs the Marquis from behind with his sword, hearing gurgling sounds that continue. The body falls to the ground, and now Actilus looks at the woman, who blinks in surprise. He had promised not to let her die, and at the last moment, he kept his word, ensuring the lady's safety. The girl is still feeling unwell. Her body aches mercilessly, making her cry. The drug the heroine took allowed her to transcend human limits, heightening her arousal and eliminating her fear, helping her fight with distinction in the tournament. It's impossible to even imagine what would have happened if it hadn't appeared at the right moment. The only downside is that the drug has a side effect. It overloads the body and can suddenly lose its effectiveness. For this very reason, it cannot be used for military purposes. He needs another dose to make it easier. Opening the jar, the blonde pours the contents into his mouth, then leans forward to give the woman a kiss. With a clash of lips, he also delivers the precious antidote. It hadn't even been a few minutes before the lady felt much better. She was surprised that everything had turned out this way, as she had no idea she'd feel so bad at the end before taking it. Her body no longer aches, and her head has calmed down, just as her fever has subsided. Thanks to Unro, the emperor managed to have some fun, and for that, he should be grateful. Gesturing to the side, the man says that this is all the loot his wife has acquired. From now on, she can be considered the rightful ruler and citizen of Actilus. The banquet at the end will be dedicated to Angie, the newest inhabitant of the empire. After everything was over and everyone had returned, Raniero announced to the people that the hunt was over. The Empress had managed to single-handedly catch all the game, which was now being dragged back. Now that the girl has completed her hunt, she has truly become a full-fledged citizen of the state. And this is proven once again by the people around her falling prostrate. No matter how you look at it, everyone around her worships a force capable of conquering all. Everyone's attitude changed immediately after the results were announced. Afterward, my husband also announced that the banquet would be dedicated to Angelica. It was scheduled to take place very soon. Evening arrived rather quickly. The maids helped the heroine get ready. But even so, she struggled to pull on her outfit, which, for some reason, didn't fit. She entered the hall with her head held high. The girl was told to come closer and sit next to him. She obeyed everything he told her, so she immediately moved closer to the king. Noticing his strange look, I had to ask what the problem was. The young man compliments the beauty, who merely smiles, thanking him for what he said. The heroine doesn't even ask why, or who is behind this, since she knows perfectly well it means nothing. The mistake was made, because the king actually finally remembered his wife's face. Remembering faces isn't a supernatural human skill. In the book, Raniero couldn't do it. It seemed like it was all because he was an emperor, but at the same time, such a wise man sitting on the throne must somehow pay attention to his surroundings. The man asked the empress to come to him. She's just wondering what the problem is, since remembering faces can't be real. He wants to know what Angie is so absorbed in, seemingly having completely forgotten she's at an event in her honor. Everything became apparent within the first few minutes. It's strange not to notice that the beauty has begun to behave a little differently. but she tries to justify it by saying that she's still feeling dizzy from those medications. Being a liar isn't the best trait. The hero leads his wife to the dance floor where they plan to dance. She's already forgotten how Raniero likes to ruin the first dance. There's no point in provoking the young man any further than necessary. Otherwise, the dance might not end as well as it should. The girl is afraid she'll do something wrong, as training for the hunting competition has taken up absolutely all her time. She's relieved because Angie's body clearly remembers all the movements from her time in the kingdom of Unro. The couple moves harmoniously across the dance floor, forcing everyone around them to make way for them. The maiden almost steps on her partner's foot, but at the last moment she steps back and plummets to the floor. The king extends his hand, but she doesn't grab it and instead ends up on the carpet. Smiling, the blonde man praises the beauty for her skillful response to the situation. If she had grabbed his hand, she would have touched his body without permission. Now she has to reap the consequences, so the heroine slowly rises from the ground. The people around stared at the spectacle, but the king quickly frightened them away, ordering them not to be distracted from what they were doing. Instead of laughing at the queen, he picked up her body in his arms to carry her away, thereby lightening the heavy burden. Seating Angie on the throne, the hero asks if she's hurt, to which she simply nods. This is actually a lie, as her back hurts incredibly badly. The girl secretly rages, realizing that the hero could have tried and caught the woman instead of testing her. Everyone is excited about making new acquaintances who could help each other in the future. The heroine glances around the room, but then notices Sylvia, who, kneeling, greets the Empress. A murmur rises in the room, as Jacques has dared to attend a banquet in honor of Her Majesty. One glance at the daughter of the family that betrayed the king makes the aristocrats want to leave. The atmosphere becomes tense, like a balloon about to burst. Everyone asks for Sylvia to be thrown out of the banquet hall so she won't get in the way. People around them can't stop complaining about the blonde's arrival. The queen interrupts the squabble. Sylvia has proven her loyalty, and no matter how sinful her family was, she was willing to sacrifice her family ties for them. This makes the girl more devoted than any of the assembled aristocrats who do nothing. Silence falls over the room, and the heroine realizes she's clearly said something wrong. The king laughs, thanking the queen for amusing him. The girl says she was just joking, which draws laughter from all sides. People tend to change their minds rather quickly. The woman has come for the promised reward, so His Majesty appoints Sylvia as the queen's chief maid. Silence descends upon the hall, creeping back into consciousness. It's a shame the blonde wasn't elected ruler. Her appointment as personal maid could have waited until after the banquet, but she chose to hear it all here, in front of all of high society. No one would dare tolerate rudeness to the girl, because such is the privilege of being the Empress's personal maid. She will be under Angie's protection, who will ensure she receives the treatment she deserves. Cician interrupts the Empress's thoughts because she wants to welcome the arriving guests who wanted to greet the queen. Banquets are the best place to make the necessary connections, because the maiden smiles. She will be happy to chat with each of the guests. The day has drained the heroine of all her remaining strength. She no longer realizes how much she needs rest. Even though it's already evening, the sun is still high, so she should stroll further through the garden. The maiden still wonders why she ended up in the palace and why she, of all people, became the new empress. His Majesty calls his wife, appearing behind her. He offers no greetings, merely declaring that she has done an excellent job, which he greatly appreciates. The girl looks quite carefree. It's worth remembering how just recently, just this morning, she killed a man who was trying to escape. We're talking about Roberta. Not everyone could have endured everything she had to endure so calmly. The girl became a killer, even if it was in self-defense, to survive. Unfortunately, there's no fact here that could help her save her reputation. In fact, if not for the circumstances, the queen would not have been able to kill a man properly, as she considers it something beyond her power. She didn't want to do it, but she had to. In the end, everything didn't end as badly as it should have. Back then, at the competition, the beauty thought she'd met her end, but ultimately things weren't so horrific. The heroine owes thanks to the emperor, for without him, death would have come. For the young man, such battles are akin to ant fights, but there are two differences that give him pause. The ants have a reason to fight, but the queen had none. She was simply forced to do what she was forced to do. That's why the prince injected the maiden with that potion. It helped unleash feelings that hadn't been so heightened before. It was a joy that couldn't be replaced by anything. Even knowing the consequences, the hero felt no guilt but savored every moment. Ultimately, the man didn't quite expect things to turn out this way. The girl could have tried to run away or started screaming in terror, but instead she chose the more humane option to stay alive in this competition. Instead of drowning in the darkness of what she'd done, the heroine simply walked cheerfully into the room in the dress she'd been given, trying to keep her head up. She wanted no one to question what she'd accomplished, not even her own conscience. At that moment, a slight shudder ran through the young man, allowing him to examine the lady who had entered the hall. Only then did he truly discern her beautiful face, which over time he even remembered as the first he had ever seen in Actilus. A strange feeling haunts the king. For the first time, he's recognized someone's face, and it belongs to a weakling who couldn't even defend herself. Without saying anything out loud, he asks them to follow him, holding out his hand for them to grasp. They entered the imperial palace. Until that moment, the maiden hadn't even suspected what it looked like, so she tried not to think about it. A spacious, deserted room with a single window, Raniero's secret chamber, which no one was allowed to enter. The couple stands in complete silence in the room, which now makes the heroine feel special. The man says nothing, because he needs to know his wife's first thoughts. Angie knew about this room from a book, but who would have thought she'd actually find herself there? Indeed, the present now seemed like an illusion, about to dissipate, leaving behind only a dark reflection. As she moves deeper, the woman freezes. The young man begins to undress in such a secret place that the girl blushes crimson. She feels embarrassed at having to watch. Remaining in his pants, the hero turns around. The first thing he notices is her reaction. So he chuckles, asking if the woman likes what she's watching. Next, he leans unrow against the wall, placing his hand next to his head. The young man kisses the beauty's lips, not allowing her to even resist. She says nothing, even after her body is released. Climbing into the water, the blonde offers to join in, knowing she'll likely agree as she's looking at him with a languid gaze. Sitting on the edge of the bathtub, the woman lowers one leg, noticing that the water is too hot. She can't move any further because she doesn't like the temperature. The man asks her to lower herself so she can get used to it faster. The girl still doesn't understand why the boy showed her the Emperor's secret room. She'd like to understand, but it's not happening, and that's precisely what preoccupies the young heroine's mind. His expression seems focused, so to dispel any doubts, the hero grabs her leg. Once in the water, Angie tries to protest. The temperature no longer bothers her, as the only source of embarrassment is their position. The king usually appreciates this trait in his beloved, but today it irritates him beyond measure. Watching the girl's hand shake violently, the blonde sighs, letting her touch his body. A second later, Angelica reaches out, wrapping her arms around the boy's shoulders. After a few hours of relaxing in a warm bath, the couple finds themselves in bed. They look at each other as if trying to convey their feelings. Their hands intertwine before they get down to business. The girl falls asleep. She's tired, and the day can only be washed away a little by a good night's sleep, which is nothing compared to water. Her husband didn't let her sleep, so he chuckles, thinking his wife has become more willful. Now it's all over, for even if the young man closes his eyes, he will still see the image of this lady. She is now rightfully a citizen of Actilus, for the people have recognized her as such. From now on, the people will treat her with the great respect an empress deserves. A girl who only picked up a weapon a month ago was able to defeat far more experienced men and successfully complete the hunt. All this simply means she has enormous potential that needs to be nurtured. Dreams come in all shapes and sizes. Sometimes they're good, so good that you wake up thinking you've had a wonderful night's sleep, having experienced another reality, but sometimes you just want to escape. The girl tosses and turns, muttering something about a terrible dream haunting her. Lifting the heroine's body, the young man pulled her closer to him. He didn't have to think too long to realize she was having a nightmare. There was no escaping it, no matter how hard you tried. So the only option was to wake up. In a dream, the girl was stalked by headless prey wielding an axe. It was the body of Roberta, who had died that morning at Angie's hands. To calm his lover a little, the man gave her a kiss, which came at a price as she bit his lower lip hard. Everything will be fine, so the next dream isn't so terrible. Morning arrives unnoticed, bringing rays of sunshine. The ruler of the empire calls Angie by name, asking why she's ignoring him. Her eyes instantly open. The girl immediately jumps up. She apologizes for not hearing anything, hoping she was being asked. The man ignores this, asking her to wash and change before speaking. It didn't take long to get ready. Cecian, as usual, helped her pick out an outfit and get dressed. So within an hour, she was already sitting at the table with breakfast delicacies. The king's intense gaze is too burdensome. The beauty sits directly across from him, wondering how she could avoid it. It's uncomfortable to have breakfast in the main palace, considering that it used to be the Empress's castle. The girl looks down at the floor and ponders something for just a few seconds. She wants to go back to her palace. I had to express it as coming home without specifying where exactly. Virgo completely forgot how to say it, so she got confused. Realizing she needs to smooth things over, the beauty says she doesn't know what she's saying, as she only just woke up. In response, she's asked if she slept well last night. It was actually a bit nerve-wracking. That day, Sylvia was to enter the Empress's palace, and as hostess, she was a bit nervous. Most likely, the lady just wants to get home, so she's lying again. The blonde knows everything perfectly well, so he wants to torment the woman as much as possible. After a wave of anger, the heroine accidentally notices a cut on her lip that seems to have appeared out of nowhere. It wasn't there yesterday, but it's quite noticeable. Noticing his intense gaze, the young man frowns. The girl apologizes as she's simply worried about the dried blood on her lip. Leaning closer, the hero offers a closer look. This is done by Angie herself, who freezes in horror as she doesn't consider herself insane. The girl doesn't know what answer to give. Perhaps she really did it, but it could also be another attempt at bullying. It's impossible because the lady would never have dared to wound His Majesty. It's doubtful she still had a head on her shoulders, since she'd already done such a thing. That's right, and the young man nods. He remains silent, only to later say that the wound on his lip was the result of a terrible crime that had been committed. A terrible deed requires punishment. That's why the young man has no intention of sending his wife back to the castle. The man who cut his lip must be punished, but Angelica, who did it, for some reason still wants to return to the Empress's palace as if nothing had happened. The girl will always be there, but that's not so important. Every morning, the Emperor sorts through letters from other countries. During the day, he has meetings, and at night, he trains. There will be no way out unless you try to slip away during his negotiations, which are coming soon. Raniero's punishment is severe. The young man ordered the lady to stand next to him. She didn't sit down because there wasn't a single chair around that would fit. Calling the butler, the hero asks for a chair. If the girl continues to stand in one place, everyone might think she's looking down on the king. Apologies immediately follow. The desire to be above the emperor is understandable, but it means nothing. Unro has become more accommodating. The man asks the girl to get up from the floor quickly. She doesn't intend to kneel when they bring a chair, because who knows what they'll think? Cician and Duchess Nemra stayed home, making him long to return even more. The young man is distracted from his studies by noticing a letter from the temple. The Temple of Tunia stands on barren, ownerless lands. Those who abandoned fertility remained here as followers. Relations between the Actolus Empire and the Kingdom of Sumbinia are strained. The cause lies within the empire itself, but now they are asking for help in a friendly manner. All the letters are rather boring, so the man turns to the queen. He is surprised because she accidentally fell asleep. The blonde leans closer to wake the girl. She must be out of her mind, having suddenly fallen asleep right in the prepared chair. The beauty managed to wake up, but she was terribly frightened. She jumped in surprise and fell silent until an idea occurred to her. She'd like to see the letters that arrived, or for Raniero to give her some work. The Empress has a right to know the affairs of the kingdom, but now is not the time. Silence falls over the room as the heroine begins to worry that she's said something wrong. Her thoughts are written all over her face. This amuses the king for now. He leaves everything as is, not intending to dispel the maiden's doubts, who is already ready to scream. Actilus dragged his wife around with him all day long. It got to the point where she was even at his side during meals and political meetings. She even had to stay during the night training, which left the girl exhausted. Because of the man, the lady was on edge for 2 days. The Duchess, noticing her mistress's state, covers her with a blanket. It's not as cold outside anymore as it's summer, but the nights are still not ideal. Bowing her head, the girl thanks him. She's glad that at least someone is helping her in this deceitful environment. Nemra says the couple looks good. It's all because people think so. But in reality, it's completely different. The only thing the Empress wants is the Emperor's indifference so that he forgets about her existence completely. Sylvia, standing to the side, looks sadder than usual. Originally, there was supposed to be a welcome party to celebrate the first day of work. Because of Raniero, nothing came of it. The woman bows her head, saying the hunt was worthy of medals. The newly arrived girl has truly won the hearts of the entire empire. Everyone eagerly awaits the meeting with Her Majesty. The canceled banquets will go ahead. It's wrong to act this way, but Nemra expected it, so she allowed rumors to leak into social circles. The brunette didn't say enough to make one wonder about loyalty. She simply expressed that the king was a sincere man. At the beginning of next month, all people who wanted to make an appointment can meet with Unro at the appointed time each. Not everyone gets such an opportunity, but in her head, the queen is already screaming in fear. Less than 3 weeks remain in which to prepare. Judging by the situation after her debut, the girl will also be responsible for the affairs of the imperial palace. Even if Unro has become a member of high society, she has no advantage. Once the summer solstice festival is over, I'll have to do something else. This only makes me more tired. 15 days left. Virgo was so immersed in her studies that she didn't notice how time flew by. There were too many details to remember. It feels like my head is about to explode. I can't remember everything I read so hard, and it's terrifying. Duchess Nemra gave me the book, saying I needed to memorize everything, even if it wasn't clear. Raniero interrupted the lesson and snatched the book. The young man has recently begun visiting the Empress's palace too often, which disturbs the woman who wants peace. After a few minutes, the hero decides the exercise is pointless. It doesn't matter who gave it, it's all clear anyway. In such a situation, all you need to do is raise your head and smile haughtily. That will work best. You could say the maiden doesn't know anyone and doesn't want to know anyone, but she'll still allow you to tell her name. That would be a greeting from a king. The girl is the wife of a man who behaves in much the same way. They should be the best match for each other. A woman who lives and is in a relationship with a king must be powerful. She can't try to please everyone around her. It doesn't seem like the lady doesn't like imitating a man, so the best option is to follow the instructions given. As far as we know, Virgo women are very weak-willed. If she doesn't like doing what her husband wants, it's best to keep her emotions in check. The blonde is right about something. A girl's expression always says it all. Now he notices the changes and asks if she should say hello. All was well, so the conversation ended on a good note. A week later, the day of that very same celebratory banquet arrived. Cician had been fussing over the Empress since early morning, so after a while, she announced that the banquet had to be canceled so as not to ruin anything. It's possible, but not entirely. It's necessary anyway, since the menstrual cycle is irregular and accompanied by severe cramps. Raniero had foreseen everything. He knew the lady was unwell, but she couldn't have guessed that was the reason. Nothing is more important than the Queen's health. With all due respect, Her Majesty's situation has only just stabilized, so Nemra is not backing down. Both girls are right, so the lady shuts them up. This is an opportunity she can't miss, as everyone still remembers how the beauty distinguished herself during the hunt. The celebration will proceed as scheduled. Painkillers should help you get through the day, after all, surrounded by others. As soon as the Duchess leaves, the beauty reminds Her Majesty that she has already suffered enough. There is no time to relax. Cician always worries about the princess, so she stays by her side, She is ready to make any sacrifice for her family. In reality, life in the Empire is far from easy, so her feelings are understandable. The brunette is simply adapting. Since Unro is already there, she needs to accept it. The banquet begins. The pills have barely helped, so the heroine cringes from the pain inside her, devouring her. Usually everything is individual because each person is different. But the lady did not think that the spasms would be so strong. In any case, it's too late to regret because there's no turning back. You just have to endure to overcome each obstacle. All guests were personally selected by the Duchess. Stepping forward, the beautiful woman greets everyone, hoping they will enjoy themselves. The choice fell on those with ambition and those whose connections could prove useful to the queen in the future. Everyone lines up. The woman can't concentrate because of the pain in her lower abdomen, so she can't remember the information she needs about the people. There was no need to be stubborn. I should have just canceled the event. Now I just want to run away, lie down under a warm blanket, and rest. The girl realizes it's too late to retreat, so she asks everyone to line up. She doesn't know anyone. This simply means that you're still getting to know everything. You don't need to get close to examine your interlocutor. It's a pity for the Duchess, but the maiden isn't about to let her reputation be ruined by her own weakness. Better to take matters into her own hands. Pointing her finger forward, the woman chuckles. Apparently, someone is keeping her waiting too long, which doesn't seem so funny anymore. The brunette introduces herself as Akubela Doshino. She's the wife of Count Doshino, and even if it's not prestigious, they own their own mine. Next, a count of everyone who knows each other begins. Virgo smiles, saying she's glad to meet everyone. The introductions were over, and Nemra handed over a mug of tea. Her Majesty surprised the maiden, who hadn't expected things to go quite this way. The lady seemed upset that the event had gone so unpredictably. Normally, the queen wouldn't have done such a thing, but it was a necessary measure. The heroine clears her throat, reminding Madame that she came to serve, not to impose order. She should be concerned about the girl's health. This woman is very smart, so she senses boundaries and never crosses them. She immediately apologizes. Everything went relatively smoothly after that. The only downside was the fatigue that gradually began to overtake the beauty. People suddenly turn around. The emperor appears, entering the hall, greeting his wife first. Stepping forward, the blonde man laughs, saying he has no idea who any of them are. He's acting exactly like the woman did earlier. Looking around the room, the young man announced his desire to be near the empress. He had come solely for this purpose. The handsome man's next step is to scoop the girl up in his arms. He's about to take her away from all this chaos. A wife will be much happier spending time with her husband than wasting away with some incomprehensible aristocrats. The guests are confused. This behavior shows complete disrespect for the maids, who will have to clean this up themselves. The girl felt incredibly stupid and awkward, but strangely, for some reason, she was happy to see her husband for the first time. At the Empress's castle, the couple was met by the maids who had remained inside. One of them was Sylvia. The Empress is feeling ill. The girls think they should help, but the young man, completely ignoring them, leaves. Finally, he says he'll do everything himself. The Emperor is becoming more and more of a sweetheart. When they married, the lady couldn't even imagine such tenderness. Clearly, he's not bothered by all this hassle, and he's doing it voluntarily to help. A new painkiller is needed. Sitting down next to her, the blonde man begins to speak. The woman is certainly proud, having decided to turn the whole event inside out right away. It's lucky that people turned out to be slow-witted. You won't find any insightful people in this country because there are very, very few of them. Jumping up abruptly, the lady remembers that the king was scheduled to attend a political audit. He somehow ended up at the banquet. The topic wasn't worth discussing at the meeting. He thought it best to leave the matter to the ladies so they could make the right decision. Actilus is the most powerful empire, so this approach is wrong. Smiling, the woman asks about the topic. The topic turned out to be the Temple of Tunia. It's the refuge of the main character, Seraphina. A meeting is scheduled to take place very soon. The letter did indeed arrive from the temple. They possess no power. The local soil is barren, and their lands are no longer of any use to anyone. Actilus didn't even reply to the letter because he decided that such a thing wasn't worth his attention as such. From the novel, the girl knows that Tunya almost always tried to reconcile the two superpowers, but they could never come together. The letter has nothing to do with Sambia. It says that the time for the demon eggs to hatch is coming and the king will come to collect them. It's a lot of fun when you have to grant merciful deaths to demonic creatures. The god of mercy has granted lands where slaughter is inevitable. Raniero won't let another bloodbath pass by. The young man is about to agree, and now nothing will stop him. Noticing the maiden's gaze, the hero offers to lay her head on his lap, and then perhaps leniency will be shown. Suddenly, Seraphina's presence became felt. Perhaps the temple would send messengers, and she would be among them. We need to think rationally. If the plot follows the original story, Seraphina has no business being an Actylus so early. The first meeting was supposed to take place in winter, but the couple grew closer, something that wasn't the case in the original. One can only hope this didn't affect the plot in any way. While the girl was wondering what could have changed, the young man put a candy in her mouth. She likes sweets. For Raniero, it's just another game, not worth paying attention to. The good news is that at least the girl got something tasty. His Majesty is distracted from his conversation with his wife. She asks if her husband will allow her to live at least until winter. For the Empress, the hero promises to do everything possible. Words can't be trusted, but this time he really wants to. Not much time has passed, but since the banquet was disrupted, no new one has been planned. Angie tries to focus on the Temple of Tunya, which occupies all her thoughts. Virgo wants to get all the information the book contained. The plot is already known, but the basis is needed. If the couple meets before the appointed time, the main character will be in trouble. In that case, she won't even survive until winter. The book contains information. Saint Tunya is the most important being in the temple, so she never leaves it and has no contact with the outside world. The girl was ready to scream with anger because she had hoped to find something more than just one line. It was still better than nothing. The original story tells of a connection between Tunya and the god Actilla. She had only a vague idea of how much power she could wield. The novella turned out to have more stories, even about demonic beasts, than about Seraphina, who also remained the main character. It was also discovered that when there is no food, the temple's messengers hunt and then eat the prey in the form of animals in the forest. Not far from the temple are lands inhabited by demonic beasts. After their numbers increased, they began to attack human lands. The arrival of the animals was called a wave. The sanctuary had always served as a barrier, but this time, something clearly went wrong. In any case, Seraphina doesn't have to come to Actylus, so it makes my heart feel better. The realization of something occurred to her rather quickly. The beauty realized she was still missing something. When setting out on a demon-slaying mission, you must cross the temple grounds. They can meet there. If things have come down to such trifles, the lady should watch her behavior, because she doesn't even have an escape plan. When these two meet, the maiden plans to run away and never appear anywhere near the Empire again. Several tense days passed. The day to leave arrived, bringing its own worries. The first diplomatic delegation to be received since the wedding arrived from Tunya. The Empress is on her way to the meeting. A blonde man appears right in the middle of the hallway. He glares menacingly, asking his wife why she hasn't had breakfast. It's not like she's eager to greet the temple's messengers, so the lady says she feels a little unwell, knowing she's lying. That's not how things are done. In this case, the best option would be to avoid meeting with the delegation yourself. As the young man leaves, the woman grabs him but immediately apologizes. She didn't want to do anything, but she's eager to participate. The girl is now also a resident of Actylus and, what's more, has become the emperor's wife. She has every right to do as she sees fit. Seeing the lady off with him, the young man gestures toward the throne. As soon as the faithful of Tunya arrive, Actylus greets them. Those who have arrived bow their heads. They are not the type to bend the knee, but they do so anyway, purely out of respect. The queen's eyes widened. The archbishop had arrived in person, something the heroine certainly hadn't expected. She'd thought there would only be envoys. Also among the ranks is Eden, who is also Seraphina's first love. He is also mentioned in the novella. The Holy Knights of Tunya are those who have managed to become a strong warrior and also resist demonic beasts. Eden wasn't a particularly important character, but his innate skills had propelled him to the top of the Order of Holy Knights. This young man showed great promise. In the original, the saint always yearned for her lover and could not wait for him for long, but he was killed immediately at the hands of Raniero. A tragic end befell a man who truly deserved better. Sadly, he never lived to see it. The blonde man asks for proof of his loyalty. Those who ask him for help must understand exactly what they're getting into. What those who arrived have already said is not enough, but they try to take sides in order to convince the man. Out of mercy, the boy will not accept any offerings. After these words, an ominous premonition appears that haunts the main hall. Pointing his finger at the men, the hero orders them to kneel and beg for salvation. Otherwise, nothing will happen. The girl knew it would all be like this, but she held on to hope until the very end. Raniero began to lose patience, saying they needed to hurry. Even if the priests return, the temple alone won't be able to handle the wave. There are too many beasts. The archbishop is waiting for something. At such moments, it's best to humble yourself and kneel, so as not to interfere with your people and your plans. Eden is the first to bow. He bows his head, paying his respects to the emperor exactly as he requests. After everyone bows, the blonde man starts laughing, saying it's hilarious. Sometimes there's a resemblance to a real villain. The girl returned to the empress's palace. She still couldn't understand why Eden had done such a thing, as no one had forced him to be first. In the original, the young man has a rebellious, stubborn character, so he will never agree to something that he considers wrong. Even if everyone kneels, he will stand with his head held high. This suggests that something is not quite right. The maids had already begun discussing Eden, having been under constant surveillance for the last few hours. They thought no one could compare to the emperor, but that wasn't true. The envoys from the Temple of Tunia decided to stay in Actilis for 10 days. As a citizen of the empire, the woman was expected to care for their guests. We must do everything possible to dedicate ourselves to the new arrivals. If we don't do everything right, the consequences will be dire. The emperor came up behind her, placing his hands on Angie's waist. He caught her halfway there before she disappeared from sight. The girl is about to ask how exactly the young man ended up here, but he asks if he needs a special reason to come. The heroine thought the young man had much to discuss with the archbishop and was certain he was busy. That's why a hint of surprise flashed through her. The conversation will be postponed until later. The blonde remains silent, so we can only assume he refused because it irritates him. The princess initially wanted to discuss dinner. Most likely, not everyone would be able to fit around the dining table, so they had to wait for orders. Trying to reassure his wife, the young man assures her that there really is nothing to worry about. Everything has already been arranged, so they should head to the castle. The girl is about to head home because she got permission, but the blonde is heading with her. For some time now, the woman has shown a keen interest in the temple, and it's noticeable. Having abandoned her studies of the secular world, she sought information about Tunya. Despite feeling unwell, the princess insisted on attending the audience with the temple envoys in the hall. The empress's homeland and the Temple of Tunya are located far apart. Therefore, they cannot cooperate under any circumstances. The man reminisced about the moment he managed to bring everyone to their knees. The brunette had an honest look. The next day, the girl learned about the dinner that was about to take place very soon. She asked about the decision regarding who would be attending. The blonde ignores his own wishes and asks for the first time who the lady sitting opposite would like to see. The maiden would like to see the archbishop, the captain of the Holy Knights, and 2 elderly priests. This arrangement seems best. Unro herself might like this, but there's no denying the fact that the choice is a bit dull, especially for the hot-blooded king. Eventually, the girl gives in. She doesn't know who should be present, since they only met for the first time the day before. 2 months ago, the answer would have seemed boring, but most likely the lady would not meet Eden at the dinner table in front of everyone. The young man decides to switch to something more enjoyable, so he pulls the beauty closer to him. He grabs her hand. Angie's compliance is appreciated, but this time things must be different. The young man asks her for a kiss. After that very day, the emperor ordered Sisian to monitor Eden's actions in order to know when they would finally meet. The girl learned from a friend that the man reads the same book almost all the time. It's different from the one the priest carries with him. At one point, the brunette even thought the knight was reading a book in secret. He made no attempt to show it to the others, remaining as discreet as possible. A person from the temple can't hide something forbidden, but no one knows for sure. Perhaps it's something important. Don't make baseless assumptions. If you want to confirm a hunch, you can't blame everything on CCN. Before entering the room, the girl asked the brunette to tell her she's not feeling well. She needs to take care of more important matters. On the day of the duel, the lady approached Nemra. The girl asked to watch the duel with the other maids and then report back. The woman didn't immediately understand what needed to be done. She couldn't entertain herself while Her Majesty was sitting at home feeling ill. To be honest, everyone wants to see the show, so it didn't take much convincing. Cician will be directing. After the maids scolded the Duchess at a social event, the maids began to watch their behavior. The heroine doesn't ask for too much. She only needs it to find out who ultimately won. While everyone was gone, the Empress decided to go to the library. At this time, the room should be completely empty, with no prying eyes. There is no one around, so it's clear everyone is engrossed in the duel. Of course, that makes sense, since the people of Actilis are obsessed with these fights. The Holy Knights were stationed not far from the palace, so the Queen had everything planned out. Eden must pass along the path to the library. Everything came together. I didn't have to wait too long because a brunette appeared in the distance and headed to the place he was going. Angelica leaps out of the bushes, forcing the knight to stop. He's looking for something important, but nothing will come of it because there's nothing around. The library has very few books open to visitors. They are only available to members of the imperial family. The man was taken by surprise, but even so, his tone and face betray no fear. The young man is completely calm. Pretending not to know the name, the maiden asks Eden. He answers rather quickly, adding that he has dedicated himself to Tunya. There are no other names since the hero has decided to become a paladin. The girl interrupts, saying she was asking about something else. The name in question is the one given to Tunya by God, not the one given at birth. There must be another name to use. If the lady is wrong, she'll leave immediately. She just wants to know the truth, no matter what it ends up being. The man is telling the truth, after all. His real name is Cha Soo-hyun. The immediate question is he familiar with the book Flowers Grow Even in the Abyss? It turned out the young man had been reading the book and had also been reborn. This happened around May 18th when they both arrived here. Eden is surprised he's not the only one in this world. He never thought he'd have to deal with something like this. Virgo almost collapses in surprise. All this time she thought she was completely alone, but in the end, she was extremely lucky. Tears flow from her eyes, falling to the ground. The heroine apologizes as she forced her maid to spy on her. Offering his hand to help Angie up, Cha asks the maiden's name. She asks him to simply call her Empress because that's what everyone else does. Eden is delighted to meet Her Majesty. I never thought I'd meet someone in a similar situation to his. The girl nods. She didn't know this would be real, since in the original, she had to face death almost immediately. The man couldn't figure out how his friend had figured it out, but she had read the original. The actions were so different that they were impossible to miss. In any case, the Queen cannot remain in one place for long. Conversation must remain as unnoticed as possible. Before leaving, Angie remembers something she wanted to ask. She heard the young man reading a book. The hero read about forbidden black magic, believing it's the reason he ended up in the new world. He wants to know all the details. The problem was that the heroine had read too many novels of this genre. The transformation was ordinary, a squirrel, so she didn't even question why this had happened to her. Since the young lady believed that only she was able to move, it means that the emperor is not a migrant from another world. The king couldn't return to the new world. He's just a madman, just like in the original. It feels like a gun is pointed at the girl every day. The only thing the new pair have in common is their support for the characters who died in the original. They need to figure out what to do next. The first thing you need to do is try to remove the spell in order to return back to where the man lived before. More often than not, settlers do not return to the worlds from which they came. Even this information was revealed through books. The knights are preparing for a campaign. The horses need to be tamed before they can be mounted and set off. The knight from the Empire orders the Holy One to finish quickly so that they don't have to wait for another eternity. The emperor, sitting on his throne, watches attentively as the horses and riders come running below. His Majesty didn't like the sight he saw, so he left. It shouldn't be boring. Sishin, who was left in charge of the empress's palace, meets the king, who arrived rather unexpectedly. The brunette obviously thinks she'll get into trouble with the young man's arrival at the palace. He smirks at her reaction. Entering his wife's room, the blonde man throws the sheets off the bed. The woman said she wasn't feeling well and had simply disappeared. The maid tries to say something, but is silenced. The hero refuses to speak because he can only listen to his wife's excuses. As is well known, Paladin Eden was an exception to the rule. He doesn't participate in sparring, so he didn't go to the arena. The girl tries to extract every little detail from Cha Soo-hyun. He lives in the Tunya temple, so he may have already seen the saint. At first, it was rather strange to feel unsure of what to do. The lady was nervous about Serafina arriving with a delegation and meeting with the king. Looking down at the floor, the brunette says something about the woman, but then shuts up. Perhaps something has already happened to her. She's fine, but the woman suspects the guy has fallen in love with her. It's quite the opposite because there are no feelings. The heroine still doesn't understand what exactly is being discussed. It's hard to believe that the girl is more eccentric than in the original, and that's what gets in the way. The brunette is about to tell the truth. In fact, he doesn't really know her because he's been avoiding all encounters at all costs. It's strange that nothing is known about this couple because over time, the memories of the heroes are transferred to the new body and consciousness. The feelings the owner's body experiences are so powerful that one is forced to remain under their influence. All that exists is a distorted image. All this time, the lady assumed that Eden and Serafina had mutual feelings. He hesitates to admit that he hates the woman. The man always prioritized norms and morality. He believed it was inappropriate for a saint to have feelings for a holy knight. Angie didn't expect the terrible truth to be revealed. She tries to accept it and ask if the young man will go to hunt demonic beasts. The hero wants to explore the great library of an abandoned temple on the border. Finding clues through conventional means is impossible, so he'll have to take risks. The queen believes this is the right choice. She wants to be able to return to their own worlds as soon as possible. The Virgin is planning to explore the library. If she needs any information, she will communicate it to the young man at the Temple of Tunya. The brunette blinked in surprise. It turns out the queen is also going on a suppression mission, which will take place very soon. Angie had been planning this expedition from the very beginning, but hadn't told the emperor yet. There was no point in asking unnecessary questions. Soo-hyun isn't interested in anything, so he simply promises that they'll see each other soon. It would be best to return before the friendly sparring session ends. The maiden managed to return safe and sound. Her spirits lifted slightly. The beauty entered the palace with a smile. A surprise awaits the heroine in the main hall. She bumps into a blonde man sitting with his legs crossed. It seemed like his wife was feeling unwell. The girl insists she went for a walk because she had a headache. Her hands are shaking, making it clear this isn't true, but she's just scared. The heroine met that very night, but now she's trying to justify herself. Her body shrinks into a ball. The young man becomes vulnerable. He's nervous because the two decided to skip the sparring session and went off to who knows where. There's no problem, and it needs to be put out of your mind. Even if your wife likes that man, there's no reason to be angry. The emperor can't be jealous of an aunt. If the beauty desires that knight so much, there's no problem. They can have some fun. When the hero tries to run his hand through her hair, the girl curls up into a ball. She's scared that someone wants to touch her. Tears begin to flow down her cheeks, and as soon as this is noticeable, the young man kneels down to tuck her hair behind her ear, calming her down. This woman is absurdly weak. This conclusion was reached a long time ago, and it didn't take long. The emperor bows and embraces his wife. She asks if he's angry, and he shakes his head. He shouldn't mention anger, lest he frighten her. Closing his eyes, the hero promises that nothing terrible has happened. Everything is perfectly fine, and he knows it is. This was the first time Raniero had managed to completely fool Angie. A turning point had begun in the relationship where both parties knew each other poorly. The emotions quickly returned. The woman thought she would die of fear because she had been so incredibly frightened. It can't be that Raniero is so angry just because of the absence of a girl who usually goes wherever she wants on her own. At some point, everything went completely wrong. Perhaps the reason was the meeting with Soo Hyun, whose identity we know about. One can only hope the handsome man didn't realize the woman was up to something. No one knows these two have been reborn. In any case, I can't leave Raniero's sight for a while. It's best not to ruin the mood. Everything is supposed to be just right, but at some point the plan falls apart. The Holy Knights of Tunia have arrived once again at the Imperial Palace. It's so beautiful that it's impossible to resist the pleasure. The brunette turns away. He pretends not to understand what his acquaintance is saying in order to remain unnoticed. Noticing this strategy, the girl even praises the boy in her head. She needs to continue pretending nothing is happening. Smiling, the beauty suggests that His Majesty leave quickly so as not to be left alone with the knights any longer. Leaning closer to the woman's body, the young man smiles. She manages to be so sweet that it's impossible not to be humbled. His Majesty is looking after his guests, hoping they had a wonderful night. Brunette thanks them for the honor they have received. As the conversation continues, the young man strokes the queen's hair, as if trying to tame her. Usually the hero does something like this in front of the maids to show the family idyll. But here the reason lies elsewhere. The woman had mentioned earlier that this man was crazy, and now Eden was convinced of it. He looked strange, and his behavior was frightening. Then the blonde leans down to gently kiss the beauty before she can go somewhere. Looking the brunette straight in the eyes, the king kisses the queen, as if trying to prove something. It's unclear exactly what he's doing. Placing his hand on the empress's shoulder, the blonde notes that the woman wishes to be alone so they can leave the knights right then and there. Now that she had time to think it over, the beauty realized that when they met in the palace garden, Raniero had only been looking at Eden. The fear becomes real. The king could have recognized the content of the dialogue, or he could have misunderstood it entirely. To prevent the knight from understanding something unbelievable, the beauty hands the letter to Sisian, asking her not to open it. Everything must remain secret. The brunette didn't think the heroine would be so worried. She's afraid His Majesty found out, which is why he was acting so strange. The woman demanded an answer immediately. Hearing the phrase, "I'm not sure," she became hysterical and slightly aggressive. Even the maid noticed that the lady had changed greatly since they left the kingdom of Onro. It was as if a different person had stepped into place. On the day the decision was made to marry Emperor Actilus, the princess was pitied, crying constantly. She decided to live abroad while getting married. Angelica, who now lives in the palace, seems like a completely different person. However, Sisian is still a devoted servant, so she simply must ask what is leading to this. She starts the conversation. Immediately anticipating the conversation, the lady realizes it will be about letters to the knight from Tunia. Perhaps she harbors impure thoughts. The girl apologizes for making you doubt your actions. She didn't mean to hurt you with a prolonged silence. The woman doesn't understand why they're not telling her anything. This has never happened before, so it only raises more questions. Tears follow immediately after the words. Attempts to calm the maid weren't immediately as successful as planned. The queen doesn't care about that night. She wants to know more about the saint of Tunia. One must consider when the lady first began studying the temple. All the fuss and excitement began even before the saints from the temple arrived. This means everything is in perfect order, no matter how you look at it. Some of what was said was true, some was a lie, but that's not so important. The woman wonders why he was chosen. The heroine felt as if the man had no friends, so she wanted to help him with his loneliness. There was no other explanation. This man has been wandering alone since Ilkin's time, reading supposedly forbidden books. He's a ranked knight with no sense of belonging. That's precisely why the girl thought he'd tell her about the saint without thinking. Now Sisian understood everything. According to the heroine, she has no intention of cheating on her husband or having fun with new people. Raniero himself is listening. There's no point in worrying. These words bring a slight smile to the man's lips, which he immediately suppresses so as not to admit it. Angelica treasures this servant very much. They say they were like sisters in the kingdom of Onro, so she's not lying. The brunette recalls the day when the beauty cried over her new life. Now she has become a well-respected empress and someone who has adapted well. Wearing the mask almost every day, the young lady began to feel tired, but His Majesty is quite cute. Over time, Unro will come to love the new country a little more. There will be no need to resign himself to it, keep his mouth shut, and remain silent. Unless the lady dies during the winter hunt, she'll do just fine. They've already forgotten about the competition. The hero doesn't know why Angie suddenly has a reason to be interested in Saint Tunia. In any case, this will be revealed during the expedition. Knowing that everything will work out, the hero smiles to himself. Looking out the window at the moon and stars, the man notices that the moon is brighter than ever, completely illuminating the entire sky. Angie shifts her gaze in the same direction as her husband. The light falls in a beautiful path forward, which is a delight. Raniero acts as if he's been replaced. He tries to joke, appear nice, and act as kind and sweet as possible toward the girl. The Empress is happy when His Majesty is also happy. She can't help but rejoice when he too is in a good mood. It's strange and amusing that this fact wasn't known. Virgos are generally quite funny personalities, so this tendency manifests itself naturally. Previously, the heroine's answers were indifferent. Something has definitely changed. Now the young man asks her to stroke his head. Raniero asks about other things the girl likes. He's strange because he's usually unconcerned about other people's feelings. The blonde doesn't care about anything around him except his own mood, which is the most important thing for everyone. As always, this is the most important thing. So a second later, the hero gets out of bed because his hand has frozen, stopping to run through his hair. The girl is a resident of Actylis, so she should automatically love him. Anyone can speak in riddles. It is obvious that it is impossible to answer the question the first time, so the beauty changes the subject while still talking about the same thing. In this case, I'd like to say that I want to leave the empire and live in another country. If that's not possible, the guy should stop visiting. If only the heroine had the courage to say something like that, it would be good. For now, she's simply silent. Looking into her eyes, the girl asks to join the animal catching expedition. It's possible, but for now they're playing a game of silence. The heroine knows that this is not an answer to the question posed. But before that, the young man asked about what it would be nice to receive. If the husband had allowed her to join this expedition, he would have made his wife the happiest person in this world. Only after this is said does the heroine begin to think. Usually, like a coward, she's afraid of everything, but now she wants to watch bloody scenes. Nodding his head, the blonde promises to take the beauty with him. He ignores her and doesn't ask any unnecessary questions. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. She had never seen the young man look at her like that before. Of all the people in the world, seeing such a thing on Raniero's face was extremely unexpected. The entity that had been revealed so far resembled a beast. Now the man's expression is harmless. He's not trying to appear angry, accepting every caress. Catching herself in negative thoughts, Angie slowly realizes that she's weakening before this man's beauty. Don't be fooled. This person could go crazy at any moment. His attitude changes depending on his mood. It's worth being reasonable. In a couple of days, Actylis should have become the same as before, but surprisingly, this did not happen, and he remained just as cute. Tinkerbell sprinkled fairy dust on him, or someone instructed him to behave decently with a woman. The Archbishop arrived at the meeting just in time. He thanked the young man for the welcome they had received, saying that everyone had had a good rest. Gratitude is useless. The mere thought of having to see them all on the expedition fills the hero with melancholy. The couple stares at each other. The girl understands exactly what this could lead to, but doesn't know what she can do. It's funny to realize that Raniero is only kind to Angie, who never understood why the same thing doesn't apply to the others. Turning to the queen, the young man asks if she was bored. She remains silent before she can say anything. Raniero behaves like the primitive protagonist of an equally primitive love story, and it's frightening. That's usually how things work in novellas when the characters fall in love. This one should be different. The fact that Actylis has become kinder should be a good sign, but it's impossible to just accept it. Falling onto the bed, the woman exhales heavily. She doesn't understand anything at all, even though she's trying with all her might. Immediately after marriage, even touching was disgusting. Over time, the young man began to untie the invisible knots of his soul. The heroine doesn't know if she can escape before her husband loses interest in her. The plan might not work out exactly as planned. The blonde man also doesn't quite understand what's going on in Unro's head. She's not giving an honest answer to the question, simply trying to evade the truth. The same thing happened when she asked to go on the expedition. I was just curious about what the woman liked, but she didn't say anything. A few days ago, after a conversation, the desire awakened. The young man realized that Angie was afraid of him, constantly silent and looking him in the eye less and less. Now the hero wants to see the beauty's big smile, which she will give to him, and he wants to take possession of her completely. The desire is irresistible. A man wants a girl to fall in love with him, designating her as the most important person in her life. If only the heroine knew what was going on in her husband's head, she would have tried to run away long ago or gotten scared. Time flies too quickly, autumn has arrived, and the beast taming expedition begins in a week. Diva managed to skim through most of the books that mention magic. She found nothing about people or travel from another world. It became clear that she and Eden were exceptions, not to be attributed to anyone else. Getting back would be difficult. There's nothing left to do but go to the great vault of the abandoned temple that Cha Soo-hyun spoke of. The answer must be there. His Majesty, as usual, sneaks up from behind. The girl had previously read different literature, but her interests had obviously changed. Laughing awkwardly, the woman says she's a bookworm. In reality, she needed to find books on dark magic for a friend. Sitting down next to her, the young man asks about places he'd like to see during the expedition. There's nothing specific. Smiling, he suddenly remembers the saint who always sits in the temple of Tunia. The lady once took an interest in her. The voice refuses to settle into a normal tone, so the lady continues to stutter as she asks about Serafina. Fear and sadness flash in her eyes when the heroine asks if the man wants to see the saint very soon. Taking his interests into account, the hero agrees to what he wants. In response, he protests, which seems even more suspicious and illogical. Looking down at the floor, the lady tries to explain that Serafina is too beautiful. So much so that even the roses themselves envy her. If His Majesty lays eyes on that woman, the queen will be in big trouble. That must not happen. Stimulating the lady's pride, thus trapping her, the young man asks if she will stand in his way. This isn't what he wanted to say. Excuses don't work because the more time goes on, the worse it gets. The lady can't come to terms with what she's saying. The wife would not dare to behave inappropriately, so she understands that she needs to at least try to somehow make everything in the best possible way for herself. The hero chuckled as he moved closer. He placed his hand on the top of her head, asking the girl to do the same thing again. At least until the expedition, the maiden asks us not to think about that saint. She doesn't live in Actylis, so it will be much easier. 10 days later, the expedition began. A wide variety of knights had been assembled for it, ready to go into battle. Raniero mounted his horse, and the girl climbed into the carriage. She knew how to ride, but the man insisted on doing otherwise. In any case, you'll have to get out of the carriage, but later. A quicker way to reach the region is through the foothills of the mountain range. Due to the poorly paved road, a carriage would be impossible to navigate in such terrain. For now, comfort is paramount, since that's the decision. The only people included in the squad for any emergency were Sician and Sylvia. To escape quickly, you need 2 people with you. People say the Empress should view Jacques as a trophy because they think it will demonstrate the confidence of a victor. The more highly the queen is valued, the lower the reputation of the servant. Even if the girl does something suspicious during the expedition, the blonde won't tell anyone. All this is because no one will believe such a weak girl who has already arrived from a family of liars. 3 days later, the convoy arrived at the mountain ridge. They were forced to walk the entire distance, and as expected, the Actilians possessed remarkable physical prowess. The girl was tired even in the carriage. The door opened, and the young man asked to step outside. He wasn't used to being kept waiting. His Majesty pulls the lady by the hand, helping her down from the carriage. Every movement seems incredibly precise. It's not the most appropriate place to go to bed in such a place, so the question remains why she was called. Before moving on, the man asks the girl if she likes cute things. She nods and they continue walking, holding hands. As the couple walked, darkness fell around them. The sky slowly dimmed and stars and the moon appeared. They walk for only 20 or 30 minutes, although it feels like a long way. It's difficult to make your way up the cliff. Since the heroine likes small, shiny, and cute things, she ended up there. She stares at the view with her mouth open. The young man's face turns slightly red, something that happens for the first time. He asks her to smile if she likes everything. Angie should express her gratitude either through facial expressions or through some kind words that she says next. There's a whole bunch of butterflies around. They glow faintly, causing the beauty to blink in surprise as she's never seen anything like this before. Turning to His Majesty, the girl wants to say something, but instead the guy kisses her lips faster than anything. The young man's next step is tossing Unro onto the ground among the flowers. He continues to repeat the Empress's name incessantly. The man's behavior is even stranger. If he's really going to do what he's planning, it would be best not to mention the name so intoxicatingly. Raniero is obviously holding back. He brought the lady there because he wanted her to smile, which means the mood is important to him. After more kisses, the young man asks Angie what she likes. This time, she replies that she likes the usual calm. Calmness in itself is boring, so the young man immediately moves forward. He doesn't immediately fall in love with everything the girl does. The girl is acting too naive and primitive. Perhaps nothing will happen if everything remains as is. The man standing before the Empress is the nephew of the god of war, a demon of the battlefield who considers all people to be inferior beings. Because of this man, the girl has already been on the brink of death a million times. He doesn't care about anyone but himself. Clutching her dress tightly, the girl finally begins to speak. She's outraged that such sweet things are being said as if she's special. Too many questions, but the lady is certainly an exception. When she cries, when she's afraid, when she's happy, everything is remembered. A smile is the rarest of all things. The young man knows almost nothing about it because he's seen it so rarely and has never gotten used to it. That's why Raniero seemed to enjoy the field of flowers and butterflies. A smile still didn't appear on his face. It's a moonless night, and the starry sky is so low it seems about to fall. The girl, experiencing such rapture for the first time, asks about the methods for finding this place. There are no flowers visible along the road, but this is logical, since apparently they weren't even there to begin with. These plants absorb sunlight during the day and emit it at night. Things that bloom where the sun doesn't shine, don't shine. The man is well versed in plants, but the most important thing is the benefit that should be there. These flowers seem to have some practical function. If not for that, the young man wouldn't even be interested in such things. In fact, there's nothing special about them, which leaves the beauty incredibly surprised. She thought there was a hidden meaning. It's hard to believe the emperor simply thought the queen would like the plants. She expresses her gratitude. Nodding his head, the blonde confirms his words. He means it, knowing exactly what it took to earn praise. Virgo wants to ask something else, but asks too many questions, considering that it is time for the couple to go back. Grabbing the man's cloak in hopes of stopping him, the girl promises that she will smile if she is given an answer. There must be some other meaning to the flower garden. There must be an answer to this question, hidden deep in the mind. The archbishop, like all the other knights, expresses his gratitude for the assistance and honor rendered. He thanks the god of war for his assistance. Gratitude is of no use. The king orders beds prepared for his subordinates and then orders them to rest. In other words, this simply means that the supplies are poor and unreliable. You can take care of everything yourself. This might infuriate the other person, but feeding and clothing that many nights is quite a challenge. The higher ones should do everything exactly this way, although they are perfectly aware of the situation in the temple and understand that this is not the best idea. The first thing to do is prepare accommodations for the king and his wife. They are the most important and deserve a good reception. Strength is a virtue, weakness is a vice. Actilus is not to blame for the plunder and war in the country, even as ruler. Angie expresses her emotions through strange, pensive expressions. She doesn't even hear the emperor asking something nearby. The pair follows the knights forward. It's hard to believe the Temple of Tunian is located somewhere there, as the surrounding villages look abandoned. A large procession passes by, but none of the residents even think about going out to see what is happening. Some residents are seeing Actylus in person for the first time. He seems like an object of fear due to his personality and all the rumors. The first thing you need to do is attend the meeting after the distribution. There will be a discussion about the beast's locations and the wave level. The blonde leaves the room, saying that he can't wait for the evening when they can meet again. You just have to accept the fact that the man who used to be so explosive is now attracted to the lady. The problem is, if he sees Serafina, his attitude will definitely change. It's a matter of life and death. While the lady was thinking about what to spend the money on and how to find a place after escaping, she was grabbed by a knight who wanted to talk. It's, of course, Eden, apologizing. Loud noises are prohibited in the temple, so a trick was used. The girl was looking for the young man. She wanted to know where Serafina was staying and whether there was a chance she might run into her during the expedition. Holding his hands out in front of him, the brunette assures her that the chances of meeting him are practically zero. He's taken care of that. Even Cha Soo-hyun doesn't want the original story to begin too soon. The saint has gone on tour, as Serafina's visit will be a welcome relief for people tired of the wave. This person is excellent at their job, and it's easy to admit it. Solving cases is definitely a good way to get things done. The tour will cover not only the city near the temple, but also the surrounding villages, which are not so close. It will take some time to get back. Eden makes the girl even happier. She didn't expect to be so lucky. The question follows about the Imperial Library. There was no mention of other worlds or anything else there. It seems there's nothing left to do but visit that abandoned temple. There must be some answers there. In fact, the heroine begins to doubt that there is anything there. But losing heart is not the best option either. Before leaving, the young man asks whether the maiden will remain in the temple or will be present on the expedition. Most likely, the beauty will go with the knights. She hasn't decided yet, but it's clear that the emperor wants it. The emperor is also coming, and then the queen decides to show her hand. It may sound strange, but it seems he likes Angie. The man chuckles, smiling. It's nothing new to him, just like it is to everyone else. But the lady is stunned. When they met in the garden, the king seemed to flaunt the fact that he was the princess's husband. The day Eden sent that note with his reply, he even felt a little awkward because he was lying about something. The lady isn't very tactful. In any case, the original story has changed slightly, which makes the girl nervous. She doesn't know what to expect. The brunette remains silent, but the pause doesn't last too long. Perhaps the best option is a complete departure from the original. In that case, I wonder if the heroine will remain in this world or not. The husband might feel nothing upon meeting Serafina. The answer doesn't form properly, so the girl falls silent. It all became clear to Cha almost immediately, back in kindergarten. The protest doesn't subside. There's no reason why the lady would want to remain in such conditions alone. The girl was overwhelmed by the thought that Raniero liked her. She shouldn't have shown her emotions. The young man assured her that he would accept her choice because the surroundings were better than anywhere else. The girl is no longer sure of anything, so she doesn't try to shout. If she decides to stay but the guy needs help, she'll be happy to help. The thought of what will happen after meeting the saint swirls in my head. It's safer to assume it won't happen. A changed Raniero will either cherish the queen just as much or lose all interest. The unknown is frightening. There are plenty of suspicions, too. If love at first sight happens, then there will definitely be no escape. The woman will be the one who has to flee. One also cannot be sure that the blonde will not get tired of the woman over time, even without Serafina, who could help him with this. If the heroine knew the entire future, she could accurately answer Eden's question. But for now, this is not the case. Now, when Angie thinks about how everyone in the temple is alone and this is the only type of bed they have, she is surprised. The girl feels pity. She doesn't even know where it came from, but she tries her best to push it out of her head. In truth, Unro wasn't happy in her first world. It's easier to say that life was miserable. Reading novels, which cost a couple hundred won at most, was her only hobby. The girl had absolutely no friends. Angelica, on the other hand, was a princess who was raised in love and was well educated. She has a friend named Sisian. Logically, I should leave, but I didn't have time for more thoughts. There's a knock at the door. The heroine had completely forgotten she'd locked the door. She only realized now that she wasn't allowing anyone inside. Raniero enters the room. He brings a tray, saying it's food for the Empress, who needs strength. The guy noticed his wife had barely eaten anything at dinner. He brought her some appetizers, which she loves, leaving her wanting more. Sitting down on the bed next to the beauty and leaving the plate in the middle, the blonde spears the delicacy with a fork. The sweet filling is pleasant to the palate, making you savor the taste. Starting tomorrow, I need to lift my own spirits. Even if the words seem sweet, it doesn't matter anymore. This is still the same Raniero Actilus, from whom nothing good can be expected. Until the fear of him completely disappears, you will not be able to let him into your heart. Looking at the bed after finishing dinner, the hero sighs. It's so small that even one person can barely fit into it. The bed is truly designed for only one person to sleep on. This is the best option for use. This is precisely what the young man tells the Empress. He had intended to sleep next to her, but now he's disappointed that it didn't work out. Actilus leans closer. He's about to kiss the woman again, who, as always, must be ready. Shouting aloud, "No," the woman abruptly pushes her husband away. She doesn't know why she suddenly decided to act so rudely. The young man looks surprised, but not quite angry yet. The girl doesn't know what to do or how to justify herself. The girl was frightened, but even before, she had never thought about forbidding him from touching her body. It wasn't forbidden. Raniero had probably never been rejected by anyone, from the moment he was born, nor in his entire life. Now the blow is doubly painful. While the man is still unconscious, the woman tries to salvage the situation. She claims she was just joking, saying she didn't mean anything bad. The young man is probably already furious, so he remains silent, and as soon as he tries to say her name, she immediately asks for forgiveness for everything she did. Looking down at the floor, the heroine hopes for punishment, but hears the strangest words. The hero isn't even angry with her. Leaning against Angie and hugging her, the blonde asks her not to be afraid and not to cry. He wishes for everything to be okay. Apparently, the hero is not really angry, so the beauty tries to carefully relax so as not to arouse suspicion. The trip had been really tough, so the best thing Unro could do was go to bed to gather his strength. The queen's dream begins as usual. The saint presents a tray, asking her to look. Unsure what's inside, the woman slowly opens the lid. The first thing she notices is someone's hair. Realizing that there is someone's head there, the heroine immediately throws the tray on the floor, jumping back as far as possible. Then the king's mad laughter is heard, asking if Unro still wishes to remain in this world forever. Confidence should have been shattered 100 times already, because the foot is on the head of Eden, who also suffered. The cloak falls from the saint's head, only to reveal to the light the face of Seraphina, who looks out with glassy eyes. Her husband stands behind her, looking at Angie with much the same expression. She's his winter prey. It's strange that Raniero and Seraphina from the past behave this way. It seems the girl wants to say something, but nothing can be heard. It feels like something has hit her in the face. The heroine immediately opens her eyes, realizing exactly where she is at that moment. Noticing the young man's face just a few centimeters away from her, the girl almost jumps up and starts screaming. The beauty had a nightmare. That's all she can say for now. She wouldn't want to know what it's like again. It was strange that the lady wanted to escape even in her sleep. Raniero held her wrists tightly because the lady began to grab her neck. If the man hadn't stopped what was happening, it's unclear how it would have ended. It's scary to even imagine. On this day, it was finally time to go to the temple. I needed to seek information and forget about remaining in this world. The archbishop who greets the arrivals asks how the beautiful woman slept. She thanks him for asking, saying everything was wonderful. With the help of the god Actilla, the man was able to sleep for an hour. This is progress because usually even that is not enough. Changing the subject, the girl immediately asks what's most important to her. She wants to know where they're going, and it turns out to be the Northwest. They'll arrive at an old temple. It's close to the border, but it's now the land of demonic beasts, so that's the end. Nothing needs to be said for the lady to understand that they intend to return everything to the way it was before. The boundaries will be restored. If the premises are returned to Tunia, it will significantly raise morale, which has noticeably fallen recently. This was the idea of the most faithful paladin. The archbishop is amazed to see such deep faith among the young people. The emperor appears again at the most inopportune moment. He wants to know if the empress will be leaving with them today. You might be worried about what happened the night before the hike, but that's no reason to worry. Virgo is feeling great. The temple worries Angie a little, and it would be easier to stay in human territory, but there is still no choice. Before making the necessary decision, the queen will find out how much time will be needed. In total, it will take about 2 weeks. The heroine knows that she will definitely be in the old temple today, but she will have to wait 2 weeks, which is unthinkable. If you look at it from the other side, without paying attention to Raniero, you will have about 2 weeks to study everything properly. The enslavement team will pass through the temple and move on. If you visit the place every day, you can learn more than Eden. The heroine promises she'll have a good rest. She just wants His Majesty to return sooner so she doesn't have to be bored. If the lady goes, she'll only be a burden. She thinks she'll be holding the ruler back from doing what needs to be done on the expedition. The arrival time might be delayed because of the beauty, but she doesn't want that. It's immediately clear that the best solution is to stay home. The man must finish his work. Afterwards, she wants to accompany His Highness to the imperial palace. All this is necessary to return to their shared home, the Empire of Actylus. This is all everyone desires now. Getting ready to leave so as not to give in to his feelings, the young man promises that he will return as quickly as possible. Now there's peace. The blonde has left, and we can begin the very plan that had been in the works for so long. The lady is very interested in the God of Mercy, so much so that she searched for information in the library. She wants to enter the temple. It's worth visiting the old premises whenever possible. A promise is made not to touch anything with your hands. The Holy Knights have not integrated into the Society of the Knights of Actylus. They say they are terrifying, and the anticipation of them is palpable. Given the expedition's progress, Raniero doesn't seem to be experiencing any great joy. He frowns the entire journey. The Empress did not go with him, so one can only wonder how she managed to make such a man feel this way. Eden is lost in thought. It looks as if the Queen is deliberately provoking the young man to test his feelings. My current impression of the character differs from what I had in the novel. The description was exaggerated. My thoughts are interrupted by the screams that reach me. The Knights of Tunia grab their swords, hoping to resist. The Emperor managed to defeat the influx of monsters single-handedly and in just a short period of time. This man is only getting better before our eyes. Brunette clearly wasn't judging him because he's much better than even in the novel. As soon as the animals appeared, the blonde did not wait for anyone else, jumped forward and fought with all of them. The demonic beasts hadn't yet stopped breathing. The young man mistakenly assumed the battle was already over, so the king would raise his sword, ordering the attack. It didn't take much effort for Eden to realize that Raniero was a master of his craft. They were professionals. The further the delegation gets from Angelica, the more it seems to the protagonist that something is awakening inside the guy. The old temple was already visible on the horizon. One of the knights noticed that eggs surrounded the entire perimeter of the estate. That's why animal scouting was so close. They protect their young, which is completely natural. Some of the eggs have already hatched. The young man asks if any of them have ever seen a demonic beast hatch in front of them. If this isn't true, then everything will become clear on that very day. The blonde is confident this won't be the end of the end. The hero begins to feel sick at what's happening. The king orders everyone killed except the mothers, who will still be needed. Raniero is definitely crazy for showing himself like that. He acts like he doesn't care what he's doing. First, Actylus finished off the monsters without hesitation, and now he's playing with the eggs. In this hellish battle, all methods are fair. The Holy Knight doesn't understand the point of waiting for the eggs to hatch. The blonde is stating the obvious, but then it won't be as fun. While the conversation continued, one of Actylus's warriors came running to announce the imminent hatching. He began killing them. The cubs were born, but they didn't attack. It sounds strange, but they mistook the group of warriors for their own, which is why they behaved this way. That's better because then we just have to continue giving the eggs a chance to hatch. If we do that, they'll continue to be mistaken for food and mothers. Eden decided not to listen to the rest of the conversation, so he headed almost immediately to the place where the eggs were. Each takes turns keeping watch until they hatch, but the place seems too vile. The hero couldn't even imagine such a thing. There are no cracks in the shell. This means the babies won't hatch anytime soon, and they have time. The boy had time to explore his surroundings. Half an hour later, he wandered into a nearby library. For some reason, the brunette had previously hoped the room would be larger. There were too few books here to study the case. Pausing in the middle of the corridor, the man examines the door that has appeared nearby. It is made of stone. There is a passage inside, but it's quite narrow. There's even something written on the door handle. When Actilus's blood is ready, the door will be opened by Tunia's sword. This concerns his grandfather's heir, Raniero. The brunette thinks about the sword. He knows nothing about it, but he's sure he can look for information in the archives. One of the knights appeared in the doorway, extremely indignant. The eggs were about to hatch, and they had to kill them before they could. Nodding his head, the guy agrees to go, trying to ignore the question of what exactly he was looking at there. All suspicion falls on the simple wall, but this is not a funny joke, so the brunette quickly follows him forward. Surprise overtakes the handsome man faster than he can even begin to set off. Apparently, he was the only one who saw something special. 2 days have passed since the army left. There's news that they managed to enslave the monsters faster than expected. The maiden came to the infirmary because the wounded knights were sent out first. Cha Soo-hyun isn't here, which makes things easier. For some reason, each of them arrived in poor condition. It looks like the capture was difficult, but in fact, that was not the case at all. The goal was horrific, but Actilus's operation seems far more incomprehensible to such ordinary people. Raniero placed knights to guard the eggs in the temple, and when they hatched, he fed them to their mothers and killed them. The girl blinked in surprise. She hadn't considered what her husband might come up with to achieve his goal. Sylvia interrupts the conversation with her clumsiness. She accidentally drops a bottle of medicine, asking for forgiveness. Calling Cicienne, the queen asks to keep an eye on the infirmary, at least for a while she is away. The knights must be exhausted by thirst. The maiden promises to bring something to drink, asking Sylvia to come with her. The heroine doesn't know if everything is all right with the lady. She looks tired, but if someone tells her to rest, she won't be thrilled. Stopping in the middle of the corridor, the blonde suddenly asks why Her Majesty cares about her so much. The girl is the daughter of a traitor. She should have died, but instead they showed mercy. They treat her too well. The words are jumbled into one incomprehensible mess because the lady doesn't understand what is expected of her. She won't treat you badly. The maid must hate the Empress and believe that she is the reason for Marcus's downfall. It doesn't work that way, and only now has it become clear that both of them had absolutely no reason to hate each other. The girl shuddered in the infirmary because, listening to the story about the animals, she remembered how she'd beaten her own mother. Leaving her hand on the woman's shoulder, Angie asks her not to continue. She understands perfectly well that this conversation is unpleasant for both of them. The emotions burst forth. The girl clutches the Empress's body and presses closer, beginning to sob. Watching Sylvia cry in her friend's arms, she felt a sense of connection and could understand her, as her emotions simply couldn't be contained anymore. The fact that Jacques showed her weaknesses means she's likely too trusting. It's impossible to say for sure. The heroine regrets that His Majesty chose such a strategy, thereby ruining Sylvia's good fortune. Personal pleasure comes first, and that's a fact. A man doesn't care about his friends because he cares about himself. His Majesty truly cares for the Empress, but nothing more. Even Jacques herself noticed this. As a candidate for the role of queen, the girl has studied everything, and the only person Raniero cares about is her. Given the man's character, a girl couldn't become such a person. There's no need to dwell on it too much. Doing something that is difficult is not the best option when you can choose something easier. The very idea of taking revenge on Raniero Actilus is absurd. If she tries something similar again, it's hard to imagine what will happen. I didn't want Sylvia to accidentally get what she deserved while trying to defeat an emperor who wouldn't care. Angie was convinced that the maid was on her side, but she couldn't even imagine that so much anger was boiling inside. Having reached Tunia, they were much closer to the temple. The delegation was now very close to the border, where there were no animals. The next day, the lady and the archbishop set out for the recaptured sanctuary. Everything went according to plan, as promised. Upon arriving there, the priest began to clear the battlefield so that no more unnecessary things and bodies would be lying around there. Everyone around is shouting about the brutality of the past battle, which, if you look at it, does not seem so terrible. The sanctuary is absolutely filthy. I hate to admit it, but I wish they'd reclaimed it much sooner. It's all because of the revelation. We're talking about the very revelation given by the gods to Tunisia. It had to be followed in perfect order. The God of mercy always makes his voice heard through the saints. It's impossible to reveal all the details as they are kept secret within the temple walls. Revelation is something given to saints. That's why it's considered so important to Tunya. They head to the library. Entering the room, the heroine can't believe her eyes. She asks again if she can truly read any book she wants. Books that cannot be shown to outsiders have already been moved to the current library, so everyone can look. The archbishop means that the forbidden books Unro was looking for are no longer here. Cha So-hyun was mistaken. No one knows what will happen or what exactly you might find. So the best option is to just take a look at the shelves. The library's size is far more limited than the imperial one, but the lady began visiting the shrine daily. Reading is difficult due to the poor quality of the text and the condition of the books. No suspicious books were found. This is because all the most important books were moved to a temple where entry is prohibited. A strange book fell far down the hallway. The cover is slightly faded, but the contents are still legible. Angelica freezes as she reads the title. It reads, "Flowers grow even in the abyss," just like the book they're in. The pages describe how the godson of the god of war robbed the saint of the god of mercy. The knights of Actilus encountered a blizzard and were forced to retreat. Seraphina heard the voice of the god Tunya that an important guest was coming to them and began to wait for him, since it was Raniero. When the girl read, she didn't know any of this. It got to the point where the empress's head rolled across the floor. The blonde man addresses the saint, saying that the empire is now her home. She begs him to take her back, as she longs to be home. The brunette becomes Empress of Actilus. There's no choice, just as there's no turning back, so the young man grins. The heroine falls to her knees. She tries to contain her emotions, but she is too terrified by everything she has read. Perhaps the lady is now so disconcerted because she is rereading the real story after spending time with Raniero in reality. Just like the Empress in Eden, the Emperor dies as a result of Seraphina's revenge. She is left with nothing, and this will happen next winter. There is no author's review in such books, but the girl tries to find what was said at the end, since it is quite important. There's an immutable law in the world they live in. Actilus's godson has no choice but to be possessed by Seraphina. The people around him and their relationships have changed, but the godson himself will, no matter what, meet and fall in love with the saint. The note was written specifically for a girl searching for answers. Angie no longer knows what to do to save herself. It became clear that she had to flee. All this time, the beauty had been deceiving herself because of Raniero's kindness. Angie bows her head and curses the day she got there and the emperor himself for behaving like this. A man's voice calls his wife, and she's startled. A blonde man has arrived at the library in armor to meet him. Most likely, the young man went to the temple but found no one there, so he returned here. The heroine apologizes for disappearing. The archbishop said the trip would take more than 2 weeks. That wasn't something to say at the first meeting. Bending over, the man tries to peer over her shoulder to spot the book. He asks what the queen is reading, as it's not a simple set of rules. The man heard the heroine curse someone from the book, so he doesn't understand how this could possibly be connected. Panic creeps up on her. The girl doesn't know what to do, because she doesn't know how to explain the book's origins. The young man chuckled. My wife said it was a book called Doctrine, but it's not. She doesn't quite understand what it says. I was curious to know what exactly the heroine was looking at, but it turned out to be just blank pages that had no meaning. Now I feel like laughing because that's the most pointless thing to do in a place like this. The Empress is completely bored. Nodding her head, the woman allows the man to turn around and leave. She doesn't understand why he can't see the contents of the book. As they're leaving the temple, the couple stops. The hero asks if his friend remembers what she said 10 days ago. The girl tries to remember. He offered to go on an expedition with him and became upset after hearing the story. Finally, those very words come to mind because the girl asked to quickly finish work and return to the imperial palace. That day, words were spoken about our home that most likely struck the young man to the depths of his soul. The girl didn't think he'd ever forget something like this. She hoped it would all end as soon as everything returned to its proper place, as it should have been. Perhaps that's why the young man returned early. She walks forward, intertwining her hands to show how much she missed him. Looking into the man's eyes, the girl asks if they can go home. It's late, but they can go home anytime. Sitting on the bed, the couple chats. Angie asks if Raniero enjoyed the expedition. There were a lot of eggs in the old temple. The first thing the babies smell is their mother, and all living creatures besides their mother are food. That is why the young man made the knights scent maternal, and threw their real mothers to them for food on the very first day. After that, they took the northern base and infiltrated the temple. The cubs devoured their own kind without a second thought. It would be great to see such a funny scene in person. The method seems effective, but it seems to have left Eden severely damaged. To avoid thinking about it, the beauty presses her entire body against the man's chest. The girl is tired, so they go to bed. It's still hard to fall asleep because her head is racing with thoughts. Angie likes Raniero, and that makes escaping even harder than before. It's impossible to deceive your husband because if you start to distance yourself, he'll quickly notice. The lie will be exposed in minutes. A woman must love a man with all her heart until he leaves on an expedition. She mustn't think about abandoning him at any moment. The next day, it turned out the couple would be returning to the Empire that very same day. The lady herself had wanted it, but not so quickly. The queen felt doomed. She wanted to share the story with Cha Soo-hyun so he could try searching for something else in the library. It would be possible to try to convince Actilus, but if he is as stubborn as a ram, it will be extremely difficult to convince him. The beauty can't do anything, even if she tries. She's given up beforehand because she knows there's nothing she can do. There's only one option left, and it's the best one. Maybe ask Cecian to do what she's planning, because someday she'll have to find out about everything. The woman hands the book to the servant, saying she accidentally took it from the old temple and needs to return it on time. There is no point in worrying about Raniero, because the lady is only instructing her faithful maid to do a simple job. The schedule has shifted slightly. We need to let all the maids know that the queen will be returning to the palace very soon. The heroine wasn't overly rude and tried to stay in the shadows so no one would suspect anything. Let's hope that's true. His Majesty approaches from behind. Still on guard, the beauty asks if everything is ready for the journey home. The maiden is glad that they will soon be at the castle. She is also glad that the man returned to her safe and sound. Cecian handed the novella to Eden. The queen asked him to return the book to the sanctuary, as she had accidentally forgotten to return it herself. The brunette nods. He's glad the beauty found a way to contact him, so he thinks it's worth trying to read the message. The maid still can't get used to what she was told. Angie plans to flee the Empire with the knight. The woman found the book they were in, along with a note from the author, but the emperor saw only blank pages. The brunette himself saw the same thing. Slamming the volume shut, the hero asks her to tell the queen he sees nothing. The maid doesn't hold back, asking what her relationship with Unro is. There's nothing special, but Her Majesty is planning to run away with this man already in December. To tell the truth, the young man thought that his acquaintance would stay in Actilus, but the right decision was made faster. It's still strange for the maid. The lady has adapted to the Empire and gotten used to Raniero, but now everything is changing. It's true, but so far, everything looks exactly as it should. All this time, Angie has been playing a game for the audience. The hero no longer knows what to do. Perhaps the best option is to convince the beauty, but he doesn't know how. Finally, beginning the story, the young man says that there is a prophecy that the emperor will kill his wife in the same way as Eden. The prophecy is not from the god Tunya, but simply what these two received from completely different people who rewrote it. When the paladins of Tunya arrived in Actilus, the lady recognized Cha. She contacted him and told him of her prophecy. The girl has many restrictions because of the emperor, but he seems to like her very much. In any case, it's not happiness. That's why the queen sent her maid to meet the knight. She trusts Cician, so she told him the whole truth as best she could. Unro probably wanted to be in touch with Eden as often as possible while she was in Tunia, but she had nothing to worry about, because the brunette was also heading to Actilis,